god, they're not. Piss me off. Hello. Dude, my bangs are pissing me off today. I'm gonna rip them out. No stalling. No stalling. We got 15 chapters to do today. And then I'll leave the last 15 chapters for the next day. Hello, how is everyone doing? I know, my bangs are like not... They're not banging right now. I'm just like, okay. But I'll leave them. I can't really do anything about them. I know. Oh my god, then it shows off my forehead. I just can't win. I can't win. Okay. Starting off with a Hey Bird Lady is crazy. Anybody who's not part of it is gonna be like, question? Oh, dude, it's also so hot out here. I was outside when I was like at the park. It was 28 degrees. I was melting. Probably gonna go to the beach tomorrow because I'm gonna need to after I finish work. It'll just be so hot. Other than that, how is everybody else's day? How's everybody doing? I didn't. If it's part of the campaign, I will probably hear about it though. Yeah. Probably hear about it, which will be good. Okay. We're on chapter 1120. Okay. We're on chapter 1120. My goal is to finish up to 1000. So we're going to read up to 1135 today. And then I'll finish the rest of it. I was going to do it on Monday, but I might work on Monday. So if not Monday, which I'll let you know tomorrow, it will be on Tuesday. And then we'll finish it. And I'll read the last 15 chapters. So, we'll see. Okay. The dark blue, boundless sea that ebbed gently and seemed to contain infinite life was presented to members of the City of Silver's expedition team. It was oh right, we found the sea. I forgot. It was no longer, I don't know how I forgot, I literally read that last night, written down in ancient books, nor was it a combination of words spoken out by outsiders. Although it was still very far away, it seemed like contact was possible. The wine, red-haired Antiona watched in daze as she opened her mouth, as though she wanted to say something, but in the end, all she said was the words, the sea. Just as she finished speaking, the silver crack suddenly appeared on her forehead. The crack shot up rapidly, instantly splitting Antiona into two halves. Warm and bright red blood gushed out, splashing across Derrick's face. Without a sound, more silvery white light shot out from her body, splitting her body into countless small pieces of flesh. The revealing face around... Oh my god. No, literally, I'm like, I feel like I need to have, like, super dramatic music right now. It's a crazy starting place. Is it playing? The revealing face, full of hope, was like a puzzle that had fallen into the ground, splattering everywhere. It was only at the moment that Demon Hunter Colin reacted. He brandished his words together and slashed them diagonally outwards as though he was dealing with invisible... I know, it started off so loud. It was such a jump scare. Dealing with invisible enemies. Silver light flashed and the sound of metal reverberated, echoed the morning sun around Colin Iliad, shattered and scattered in chaos. At this moment, the silver phantom behind Shepherd Lovia had already taken a step forward and stabbed the blurry giant sword into the ground. Clang, clang, clang. As the surrounding people of the City of Silver, a streak of silver light appeared in different spots, trying their best to cut through the invisible barrier around them like insects struggling in amber. The dense, sometimes thick silver light constantly appeared, causing the defensive powers of the expedition team to tremble, as though it would shatter at any moment. However, be it Demon Hunter Colin, Shepherd Lovia, or Derrick, they couldn't find any traces of the enemy. The fool above the grey fog was just about to give a certain reminder when the chief of the 6-member council seemed to realize something and crossed the two halves of the swords in front of him. The gigantic silver beams stuck the two swords, causing Demon Hunter Colin's feet to sink into the solid stone slab. He took this opportunity and roared, "Unshadowed domain." Upon hearing the chief's reminder, Derrick didn't hesitate and stabbed his fingers onto the stones of the unshadowed crucifix, doing so without any regard for the plan. As his blood oozed out, clear, bright, pure, and blazing light subtly exploded, enveloping the entire area between the two buildings. There wasn't a single shadow in the area that could hide, nothing else could be hidden. Light had become the ruler of this region. The huge figure quickly outlined itself at the side of the giant king's palace. It was wearing a silver, full-body armor, was nearly 5 meters tall. The flicking light behind the mask that was either deep red or orange, and unmistakably, there was a single vertical eye there. It was a giant who was still alive. He didn't wait for the enemy to enter the certain range before attempting to attack, implying that he had sufficient intelligence. Unlike the other silver-armored knights, the giant bracer had bright patterns on it. On the right was the blood-red color that circled around his arm. At the same spot on the left, it was adorned with black spots. The giant knight raised his broadsword and pointed at everyone in the City of Silver. He said in a thunderous voice, "How dare you barge into the king's court and disturb Lord Sasri's slumber?" Sasri, Dark Angel Sasri, the fool client above the grey fog, was alarmed when he heard that. He subconsciously sat up straight. The former left hand of God, the deputy of the divine kingdom, the leader of the king of angels, one of the 2 leaders of the Rose Redemption, hadn't disappeared into the river of history. He was sleeping deep in the giant king's court, sleeping in the residence of the giant king. Why did he choose to enter a state of slumber? Many thoughts flashed through Klein's mind as he subconsciously cast his gaze towards the palace that a giant knight was guarding. It was the tallest and most magnificent building in the giant king's court. The dusk light seemed to transform into something corporeal and convened its surface, denying it was a clear sense of decline. It gave off the feeling that the sun had set and the eternal tide was coming. On both sides were sleepless, while the other side were spires. In front door was a double door that opened outwards. The gray and blue was the main colors. Its height exceeded 10 meters, and it was covered in a symbol, labels, and patterns. It looked stately and mysterious. There was a pitch-black socket on the left side of the door. It height of 3 to 4 meters tall. It was equivalent to the adult fist. Upon seeing this scene, Klein suddenly thought of a dream divination he had done in the past. Back then, he had seen the same scene in a medium he had used divination. Was the giant key he had obtained from Vice Admiral Iceberg. In the key to open the giant king's residence, as he extended his hand, he tried to use his true vision to pass through the obstruction of the building and see the situation inside the palace. Unfortunately, he failed. The iron black key, which was the size of a 7-string guitar, landed in front of him. At this moment, Demon Hunter Colin suddenly said before the giant king attacked, "You're a court chaser." The giant king's broadsword didn't cave down. Instead, the paused for a second and said in a low voice, "After all this time, to think that there's someone who can still remember court chasers. I'm the leader of all the chasers, the light curler Merskogane. And I later followed Lord Sasri. I once hunted down powerful dragons, elves, devils, demonic wolves, phoenixes. Today you are honored to die under my blade." The light color didn't soften his attitude. He hunched his body slightly and held his sword with both hands like a flying meteorite. He rushed towards the people of the City of Silver and heaved footsteps at high speed. Due to the existence of unshadowed domain, he could no longer hide his body like before. Just as Colin, Iliad, Lovia, and company determined that the Merskogane attacks would arrive any second, the giant king knight suddenly stopped his silver broadsword slash midway. Demon Hunter Collar, who wasn't in Lovia's evil spirit's defense circle, suddenly had a premonition of danger. Without any hesitation, he lunged to the side. The silver ray of light suddenly emerged at the spot where he had been standing, destroying everything from within. This attack was so strange, like it was generated by the void itself. At the same time, there was also a change in Colin Iliad, who had ducked around the ground. His clothes were torn to pieces and clothed by rapidly expanding muscles. In just the blink of an eye, the demon hunter had turned into a grayish-blue giant, and bluish-black lines wrapped around him. At his forehead was a deep black crack. Every inch of him contained immense power, infinite mystery, and a strange psychic influence. If a Beyond or Under Sequence Force saw this scene, they would definitely suffer from a strong backlash. Their brains might suffer an excruciating pain that would cause them to lose their minds. Even their spirituality would be corrupted. And if they couldn't withstand such an influence, going crazy, losing control, or even sudden death were certain outcomes. This is the incomplete mythical creature form of a demigod. Originally, Iliad didn't dare to release this form due to the influence of the twilight in the Giant King's court, but now he realized that the unshadowed domain, the feeling of decline, had weakened significantly. He then raised his 2 swords and had enlarged in size as well. With them covering the light of dawn, he fought fiercely with the light curler Merskogane in the domain that was enveloped in the light and shadows. The 3 swords of the giants clashed and separated from time to time. Although Iliad was at a disadvantage, he still managed to withstand the barrage of attacks from the king's court chaser's leader. From time to time, he would feel a strong sense of danger, then without any warning, he would either duck or roll in another direction, and at the moment, silver beams of light would always appear from inside and outside. Derrick had already closed his eyes, ignoring the loss of blood. He tried his best to maintain an unshadowed domain. Haim and another Dawn Paladin similarly didn't dare open their eyes. They held Shepherd Elder Lovia and slowly moved to the ground towards the place where existing the protective domain. If not for the help of the silver-armored knight, Evil Spirit, they would have long been diced into small pieces of flesh and blood by the storm of light that swept the area. The light curler Merskogane alone had placed the City of Silver's expedition team into a precarious position. With no chance of counterattacking, as expected of the leader of the King's Court Chasers, this should be the strongest force between the subsidiary gods, or, in other words, angels, compared to the Demon Hunter. The Silver King has several more terrifying Beyonder powers above the Grey Fog. The Fool Klein held the Sea God Scepter and carefully observed the battle. He quickly figured out the aspects in which the light curler Merskogane was powerful in. Firstly, his defensive power can be transformed into a full-body silver armor set. Secondly, he can use to hide the conceal himself in the light, hiding any meticulous intent. Thirdly, the condensed sword of dawn isn't something that can maintain for a short period of time. It can be used as a normal weapon, sufficiently sharp and good at cleansing. Fourth, it can create some sort of thin silver white sword. It has the ability to teleport, and it can bypass most barriers to attack the target directly, or even cause it to erupt from within the target's body. Furthermore, this thin silver white sword condenses without any warning, making it difficult to predict. This is a saint who's extremely good at fighting head-on. If it wasn't for the rich experience and short intuition of the City of Silver's chief, it would have been danger due to the suppression effect from being in the same pathway when fighting a mythical creature form. If it were me, I might have already been killed. Of course, I wouldn't fight head-on with the leader of the King's Court Chasers. From the current situation, being the evil spirit needs to protect its shepherd, there's no way for it to directly participate in the battle. The City of Silver's expedition team has almost no chance of winning. Yes, they're already showing retreating. Very rational. If it really doesn't work, perhaps Mr. Fool will have to deliver lightning punishment. However, the true Cater should still be watching. My lightning storm might not be able to quickly resolve Merskogane. Klein's thoughts raced when he suddenly thought of a problem. How did the light curler Merskogane, who wasn't an angel, survive since the end of the Second Epoch? He's neither a demoness, vampire, nor undying, and from the possessing reason, as well as the ability he displays in battle, he doesn't have Beyonder characteristics or another pathway mixed within him. Since light curler Merskogane didn't gain his long lifespan from his Beyonder characteristics, Klein could only begin considering external factors, the effects of mystical items. No, he doesn't have any mystical items on him. Aside from the Giant King's residence, there's nothing in the vicinity either. However, that's the sleeping ground of Dark Angel Sassery. Furthermore, the key is with me. I don't think Merskogane would dare or have the means to enter. Who took the key to the Giant King's residence after Safri fell into a slumber? Isn't that a bit too wicked? Of course, this palace, without the powers of a deity augmenting, it would be able to trap the King of Angels. Or perhaps the key had long been transported to the northern continent during the migration of the giants. Sassery chose to sleep in a palace because, other than the small number of existences, no one can open the door and affect his sleep. Was Vice Admiral Iceberg key given to me through the roundabout manners of the god of knowledge and wisdom? He wants to learn of Sassery's present state. If not for the effect of the mystical item, what could it be? Time given by the angels from the Marauder pathway, ignoring the possibility of giving stolen illusions items to someone else. There needs to be an angel of a grade 0 sealed artifact of the Marauder pathway, and there aren't any similar existences nearby. Back then, Merskogane was given a lifespan of 1,000 years at once. Perhaps only a Mon is capable of doing that. Clearly, he wouldn't help Dark Angel Sassery. In addition, this blasphemer's true body seems to be wandering around the Forsaken Land of Gods. If there were angels or grade 0 sealed artifacts of the Marauder pathway here, and they might have become his food long ago. The cycle of fate. After Light Curler Merskogain's natural death, everything begins with him guarding Sasser again. Yes, that's possible. If the current Merskogain is an aged state, then it's completely understandable how so much time has passed. Furthermore, because of this time in the Loop Seal centuries, it hasn't reached its node yet. It's only normal that I didn't manage to discover any signs above the gray fog in my haste. With this in mind, he quickly observed the surroundings to find traces of Angel Fate of Ouroboros. However, there was no remnant power like that. Klein quickly retracted his gaze and continued to observe Light Curler Merskogain's intense battle with Colin Iliad and the silver-armored knight Evil Spirit. His spirit body threads are normal, emanating a possibility of him already becoming a marionette. Under true vision, his condition isn't abnormal. This means that he isn't a figure summoned from history. The divine kingdom of the Giant King's court is slowing down the time of aging, the passing of time or aging. The former can be eliminated because my spirituality is almost unable to support my level of observation. This matches the amount of time the City of Silver's exploration team has spent in the area. There is a certain chance of the latter, with life progressing in the sunset state, but being solidified during dusk. But the problem is that the ancient god, the Giant King, has already perished. Badhill, who wields the power of dawn and the power of dusk, he brought the divine kingdom to the astral world. It's possible for the king's court to still have such powerful influences remaining within it. Klein went through all the possibilities of extending one's life that he could think of, but none of them matched the situation of the leader of the court chasers. He had no choice but to consider another possibility: a secret art with a huge deficit. This should be dependent on some kind of power in the Giant King's court, otherwise the range of Merskogain's activities wouldn't be so tiny. It wouldn't take until the City of Silver's expedition team arrived at the Giant King's residence before he took action. The entity related to the life inside the Giant King's court clearly exists: the former goddess of harvest, the present Earth Mother, Giant Queen Omabella. As the thoughts flashed through his mind, he cast his gaze at the giant statues outside the palace. They were no different from the ones in the City of Silver expedition team had encountered along the way. They were only slightly larger. However, after careful inspection, he noticed a small number of abnormalities. These giant statues had the aura of life, and they possessed a certain amount of spirituality. However, behind the mask, it was pitch black without any dark red glow. The Light Curler Merskogain had used some sort of secret technique in their life domain to blind the spirits with the living statues. Using them, he obtained a long life, but this results in him being limited to such a tiny region and being unable to leave. This is very similar to the way evil spirits exist. This way, Merskogain might not be able to show his normal mythical creature form. Klein conjured a gold coin and flipped it up to make confirmation. When he received an affirmation, he raised the sea god scepter high, prepared to remind Little Sun through the prayer of light. At this moment, Demon Hunter Colin, who had avoided Merskogain's first attack, suddenly ducked and circled around him, running straight for the Giant King's resident from the side. His gaze was locked onto those gigantic statues. In the intense battle just now, although the City of Silver chief had always been at a disadvantage, he didn't give up on observing his surroundings, nor did he stop thinking. Love Colin Iliad. He was similarly puzzled as to why the leader of the court chasers could live thousands of years. When he discovered that the living giant statues were only standing outside the palace without participating in the battle, he had arrived at a certain conclusion. He didn't know what exactly was going on, which principles underlay it, or what domain it belonged to, but his rich experience in exploration and the intuition as a demon hunter made him believe that the statues were a crux of the problem. The two swords in his hands, Colin Iliad dashed forward, taking large strides. However, he didn't run to a straight line as he zigzagged his way forward. Upon seeing this scene, Light Curler Merskogain let out an angry roar as he held the broadsword in his hand and rapidly slashed forward. His reaction proved that Colin Iliad's judgment was correct. Demon Hunter Colin suddenly leaped away and did a roll, and, above his original trajectory, silver light appeared out of thin air and exploded, forming a long snake. It completely lifted the solid ground of the king's court, tearing open a deep chasm. With the loud thud, Light Curler Merskogain took a step forward. His nearly 5-meter-tall body bent and smashed the silver broadsword in his hand onto the ground. The area shook violently as the pillars snapped and fell into an orange pool beneath. The ground between the two buildings exposed layer by layer, sending countless gravel flying. As a demon hunter Colin, he had already leaped up ahead of time and was in midair. He crossed his sword, creating an invisible barrier, and blocked the rubble and resembled an arrow. At this moment, Merskogain, who had back bent his knees, and exerted strength into it. His massive body shot out like a meteorite, instantly closing the distance between him and Demon Hunter Colin. During this process, the silver broadsword in his hand moved upwards. Seeing that the Demon Hunter Colin was no longer able to dodge, a bright light suddenly shot out, accurately hitting Merskogein's broadsword. With the long clang, Colin tumbled to the ground, finally approached the giant statue, and with one swift move, at the same time, he saw the corners of his eyes that the silver-armored knight phantom in front of Aldelovia had long drawn out its giant sword. It had condensed the light of dawn into a huge bow, and it shot outwards and consecutively. Like Curler Merskogein's single eye had already been dyed with the layer of red. He didn't care about the arrows of light, and he allowed them to hit his body as they produced clanging sounds. He kept charging forward and brandished his broadsword, causing silver light to appear from different parts of the void. He chased after the giant like Demon Hunter Colin, preventing him from attacking those giant statues. Suddenly, an arrow that was gathered from the lustrous brilliance tore past Merskogein and silently hit the gap in his visor. This was from the evil spirit that Shepherd Lovia grazed. Demon Hunter Colin was merely bait. It was a real attacker. Once the arrow after another flew past. By this time, they were all blocked by Merskogein. But at that moment, the demon hunter had already positioned himself well. He aimed at the remaining giant statues and swung his two straight swords that were enveloped by the light of dawn. Light bloomed as a hurricane of light blanketed the area. With cautious cracking sounds, the statue collapsed to the ground. Meanwhile, the aura of the light curler Merskogein rapidly declined. The king's court chaser leader immediately roared, "Let's die together." The silver broadsword in his hand exploded, shattering into countless fragments of light. They formed a terrifying storm that swept everything around them. The silver-armored knight, evil spirit, and demon hunter Colin simultaneously stabbed their sword to the ground, creating an invisible barrier. The dazzling white light swept between the two buildings, destroying the grayish-blue door and stone pillars behind Derrick and company. However, when they swept into the giant king's residence, they failed to affect it completely. After an unknown period of time, just as Derrick thought that the invisible barrier was about to be torn apart by the hurricane of light, the rays of light finally dimmed. In the ruins, the silver armor of the body of light curler Merskogein slowly faded away, revealing his grayish-blue body that was wearing linen clothes. Not far away from him, demon hunter Colin's body was covered in blood, as he was transforming from a giant back to a normal state, but his aura was relatively stable. Okay, it was just as he had weakened greatly. With the clang, Merskogein genuflected as his flesh rapidly aged, decomposed, and evaporated. Under the orange light, he seemed to see a lively king's court once again. In the frozen dusk, giants came and went, playing the 7-string guitar and the bone flute, wrestling, or enjoying delicacies that they could eat at any time. The passing of their lives moved extremely slow, and their king sat on a high throne, watching everything from above with stately demeanor. After the instant none that existed, he chose to follow Dark Angel Sassery. Aww. A smile appeared on Merskogein's face as he opened his mouth and softly shouted, "King." The court chaser bowed his head, his flesh and body completely evaporated, leaving behind a huge white skeleton and silvery white light that condensed together. He just misses Franz. That's all. What are you gonna tell him to do, Klein? Above the gray fog, when Klein saw the light curler Merskogein rapidly age and decompose into bones, he suddenly recalled, that's mean, Movit, Citus, Frunzier, and Snowman when they left Roselle's travels. He didn't have time to stop it back then, and it was no different this time. This was because the leader of the King's Court Chasers had never chanted the honorific name of the Fool, so he was unable to pull them above the grey fog. However, compared to before, with the Sea God Scepter in hand, he could now do more things by using the prayer light. He immediately accommodated the Black Emperor card and activated the powers of the mysterious space above the grey fog. He made the paper angel carry his own words and use a crimson star to enter the real world and land on the remnant spirit of light, curler Merskogein. This was one of the methods that wouldn't lower his loftiness as the Fool. After all, the true creator was still watching the area. As Merskogein's consciousness was rapidly wiped out of existence, an angel with black wings suddenly appeared in front of him. The speed at which the spirit body collapsed slowed down, and he heard a loud and majestic voice. What is the advancement ritual and supplementary ingredients of the Silver Night potion? Is Sasri really sleeping in the palace of the Giant King? Merskogane replied blankly. The advancement ritual of the Silver Night comes with the blasphemy slate. It needs a completed altar to be set up, placing the remnants of the 6 powerful creatures one had hunted in the correct positions and received the blessings of a deity. Interesting. The supplementary ingredients are: I can't be certain. In short, the door didn't open after Lord Sasri entered. Amidst the response, the spirit of Merskogane's spirit slowly but firmly dissipated. Finally, he could no longer hold on, as he was reduced to points of light and merged into the still dusk of the Giant King's court. And this convergence happened with the soul domain, so no one else could hear. Thankfully, I'm carefully enough to not let Merskogane say the main ingredients of Silver Night potion. Anyway, the Beyonder characteristics can be used to replace whatever it is. Otherwise, I wouldn't be able to hear the answer of the second question. The fool heaved a sigh of relief and praised himself inwardly. He then focused and seriously thought about what Merskogane had just said. A deity's blessings. Isn't the advancement ritual a little too difficult? It's only sequence 3. I have to consider the circumstances of this timeline. Merskogane is a powerhouse who survived from the Second Epoch. It was a habit to call an angel a subsidiary god and include them in the ranks of God. This also means that the blessing of an angel should be sufficient. Yes, I'll use divination to confirm this later. Of course, even if the angel's blessings are sufficient, I'm unable to do anything for the time being. It will depend on the grade 0 sealed artifact and the City of Silver have any living characteristics that can also be communicated with. The act of setting up the altar is actually a little complicated. Must the remnants of the 6 powerful creatures that one has personally killed have to be a demigod level? It's very difficult for demon hunters outside the Forsaken Land of Gods. How can there be so many demigod creatures to be killed? Most of them are protected by the corresponding organizations. From the looks of it, the Church of God of Combat should have a new subsidiary method while maintaining the essence of the ritual. Is this different between the first and second blasphemy slate? However, for a young chief like the City of Silver, he must have killed more than 6 powerful monsters. That's easy. As he was currently certain that the second blasphemy slate had appeared after the ancient sun god's death, he was able to determine the light curler Merskogane was referring to the first blasphemy slate. He quickly conjured a piece of parchment from the interpretations of the advancement ritual and supplementary ingredients. Then a divination with the topaz spirit pendulum was performed, to which he received a revelation that there were no mistakes. Then he threw this message to the Crimson Star, repeating the sun. This is a gift from Mr. Fool after doing all of this. Klein gave a self-deprecating laugh. He instinctively felt that the answer to the second question was worth ruminating. He didn't say if Sasri was truly asleep. He only said that the door hadn't opened after the Dark Angel entered. And the only thing that didn't open was the door. The God of Knowledge and Wisdom gave me a key, and Adam gave me the unshadowed crucifix. Was it done to open the door to confirm the Dark Angel's condition? As his thoughts raced, he suddenly felt lucky. Fortunate the true creator wasn't too interested in this. If the entity had sent down his will just now and tried to influence Merskogane's dissipating spirit, he would have clashed with the fool's paper angel on the spot. This would be rather awkward. Only at that moment did Derrick dare to open his eyes. His face was pale from having loss of too much blood. In order to maintain the unshadowed domain, he had allowed the cross to absorb quite a bit of his blood. He looked around at the place of the unshadowed crucifix in front of him and sincerely thanked Mr. Fool. At that moment, Haim put away Thunder God's roar and his weapon. He removed the leather bag on the back and found a set of clothes to throw to the chief. To the City of Silver's exploration team, as long as they weren't wearing clothes and armor that were mystical items, it was inevitable that their clothes would suffer damage. During the battle, therefore, they definitely prepared a few additional sets ahead of time. To them, the purpose of clothing covered their bodies was secondary. The most important thing was to leave space to store materials, ointments, and charms. Colin Iliad looked around vigilantly, and he didn't find anything unusual. He quickly put on his clothes and found a small metal bottle that had fallen over to the ground during the battle. He removed the lid and gulped it down. His face turned a little green as if he had been poisoned. However, his wounds and signs of decline were improving. As for Lovia, she was no longer able to maintain the grazing of the silver-armored knight, and she placed it back inside her body. By the time Merskogane's Beyonder characteristics condensed into a silvery white luster that resembled a miniature sun or heart, it was put away by Demon Hunter Colin. The shepherd elder looked at the nearby palace with his gray eyes and said, "Chief, the path to the sea might very well be hidden there." Lovia paused for a moment before adding, Perhaps there's another way to get to the other side of the sea. As Colin Iliad watched Derrick, Haim, and the others clean up the battlefield, he picked up items to deal with the mutilated corpse of Anatonia. He shook his head and said, "The Dark Angel is sleeping inside, and he is definitely a king of angels, one we are currently unable to resist. Even facing him will be difficult. Let's head back first and inform everyone that we have seen the sea before making preparations for entry into the Giant King's palace." Lovia's silver gray hair fluttered slightly as she wore a solemn expression. "But we don't know anything. We can't make any target preparations." After saying that, she felt silent for 2 seconds before saying, "I have a suggestion. You, Derrick, Haim, and the others can head back first. I'll stay behind and attempt to enter the palace to gather useful information. I can fuse into the shadows and prepare not to disturb the Dark Angel. If I don't return, it means that the danger inside was exceeded the limits we can handle." When Lovia mentioned that she might die, her expression didn't change at all, as if she had long been prepared. Colin listened quietly and stared at her for a few seconds. "No, we can't bear such risks. If you awaken the Dark Angel, he might leave the Giant King's court and attack the City of Silver, but we definitely won't be able to resist against him. Without waiting for Lovia's reply, Colin Iliad turned his head and looked at the other 3 members. "Derrick, what's your opinion?" "My opinion?" Derrick was somewhat at a loss. He nearly blurted the question back out. Haim and the other Dawn Paladin were equally shocked. This was because this was the internal conflict amongst the 6-member council. Colin Iliad had actually asked for Derrick's opinion. Could it be that the chief is nurturing Derrick as the next elder of the 6-member council? The 2 members of the expedition team looked thoughtfully at their teammates. "This is him asking for my opinion." The fool Klein above the grey fog frowned slightly. His brain immediately began to churn rapidly. "What views can I have? If they were to open the door and awaken Sasser, I wouldn't be able to save any of them. All I can do is get them to ask for help of the true creator. Let's wait until I figure out the situation regarding Dark Angel from the Red Angel spirit and the other relative existence before beginning the expedition. I don't have to worry about the Dragon of Wisdom or Adam's thoughts for now. No matter what, there's nothing wrong with choosing to be calm and cautious at such times." As his thoughts raced, Klein sternly said, "Return." He then projected this image into a crimson star representing the sun. Derrick was stunned for 2 seconds before he calmly answered the chief's question. "I think we should give up for now and wait until we're ready." Colin Iliad nodded and said to Shepherd Lovia, "This is my decision." Lovia fell silent for a moment before saying, "I will defer to your decision." She didn't say anything else as she helped Derrick and company mark the area. As Anatonia was killed by a blood relative, there was a high possibility that the anomaly would happen. Therefore, the expedition team would mark this area, making the ones who arrived later to be more vigilant. However, they didn't need to worry about such effects since they were very far away from the City of Silver. While they busied themselves, Lovia suddenly looked up and said to Derrick and Haim, "This is the Giant King's court. There might not be any anomalies." She did explain as she looked at Anatonia's pile of flesh and had been burned into ash by the flames. She grabbed a handful of them and placed them inside her leather bag. After completing the matters, the City of Silver expedition team found another passageway, but they obtained the disappointing outcome. Following that, under the lead of Chief Colin Iliad, they retraced back their path. After entering the palace that had already been lost to the main door while having the oil painting band playing their tune, Derrick couldn't help but turn his head and look outside the broken railings again. He looked at the orange-red clouds in the distance towards the deep blue sea. After staring at it for a few seconds, he retracted his gaze and realized that the chief's light blue eyes were also silently looking at that direction. Colin immediately turned his head and calmly said, "Let's go." Then, without turning back, he proceeded steadily. Interesting. Above the grey fog, when he saw the City of Silver's expedition team had begun embarking on their way back to the Giant's palace, remained unchanged. Klein heaved a sigh of relief and leaned back in his chair, exhausted. After 2 hours of observation, his spirituality was nearing its limit. At most, he could hold out for another 15 minutes. Regardless, the things obtained from this expedition There you go, I rejoined. Regardless, the things obtained from this expedition completely exceeded my imagination. It's only right to give the Silver Night potion formula to the City of Silver. As he rubbed his forehead, his thoughts began to wander. Being aware of these ancient secrets is very helpful to my digestion after the advancement. The problem now is that the bizarre sorcerer potion hadn't been fully digested. From the feedback I've been getting over this period of time, it can be seen that all sorts of strange tales are indeed useful. When Miss Messenger completed the scripts and publishes it, it will just need some time to build up some momentum before it's done. However, she started writing a few days ago. I don't know when she will finish her manuscript. Why can't she just write a few more hours every day? Patience is not a virtue. Clearly. When I went back to pick up this time, I should urge her. With this in mind, Klein suddenly recalled something. He hadn't given Anderson a reward for finding Vice Admiral Element. I'll wait until he helps Donitz become a conspirer. Anyway, this was part of the agreement. The advancement ritual of an iron-blooded knight isn't difficult, but it's not simple either. Especially for a hunter, it's even more troublesome. It requires a hunter who is adept in provocation and enjoys coming up with ploys to build a team of at least 30 people and also nurture the deep sense of friendship amongst them while making them strong. When they act almost as one, I'll set up a ritual. The greater the strength and camaraderie amongst the team, the better the effects of the ritual. Seeing that the City of Silver expedition team was returning to an orderly manner without encountering any accidents, he firmly felt at ease. He felt that the world above the great fog and threw himself into bed, falling into a dream. After some rest at the afternoon town camp, Derrick Berg finally recovered, and his face was no longer as pale. He had just eaten bread made from black-faced grass powder when a figure grew out from the shadows outside as a low voice. "Derrick, the chief is looking for you." Yes, Derrick subconsciously stood up. Thank you. He was originally prepared to find the chief and hand over the Silver Night potion formula. After watching the messenger retreat to the shadows, he walked out of the room and arrived at the clearing where the bonfire illuminated. At a glance, Derrick saw many members who hadn't participated in an expedition gather their groups in 2 or 3. They were exceedingly discussing something. They already knew that one could see the sea from the Giant King's court. They knew that it wasn't too far away from the coast, and as long as they found the correct path, they would arrive there in no time. This was an important step for the City of Silver to save themselves from discovering the outsider Jack. A resident from the City of Silver who mainly had the power of dawn finally saw the light of dawn. Their long wait and persistence seemed to have paid off. Derrick could understand the feeling of his team members because he was the same. However, the world given sparrow, he knew very well that the waters and the ruins of the Battle of the Gods weren't that simple. To head to the other side of the sea would probably be extremely difficult. Ignoring everything else, just Dark Angel Sastre, who was sleeping in the Giant King's palace and blocking the vital path outside, was a problem that he couldn't overcome at the moment. I can only hope that Mr. Fool will bless me. Yes, for that boy to appear in the temple ruins, it means that there are other paths that can bypass the Giant King's palace and reach the sea. Derrick's thoughts optimistically as he circled around the quietly burning bonfire and walked toward Chief's room on the other side. Suddenly he saw a person standing silently in a shadow of a boulder. It was a man in his 20s. He was much taller than Derrick. He held a pale gold bracelet with 3 small bells hanging on it as he looked at it with his pupils unfocused. Derrick was no stranger to this man. He knew that it was the husband of Antiona Dolores, a Sequence 6 Dawn Paladin. In the City of Silver, before the age of 18, one could date freely until they were married, and if one didn't have a partner at the age of 18, they would be arranged to have one. It was the same for widows and widowers after 3 years. This was a necessary measure to ensure the necessary population levels of the City of Silver's continuation. It seemed like it was against human rights, but for the continuation of the entire city in the Darklands, it could only be done this way. Furthermore, they could ensure that everyone had a certain number of close relatives, preventing the possibility of mutating into terrifying evil spirits after their death. As for Dolores and Antiona, they were neighbors who lived on the same street. They had known each other since they were young and had a good impression of each other. In the end, they started dating when they were teammates on a patrol team. Over time, they became husband and wife and had a deep, loving relationship. Aww. In light of how they had a young child, Colin Iliad had deliberately left one of them behind during the expedition of the Giant King's court. On the other hand, Derrick felt that there was nothing wrong with the chief's arrangement. And on the other hand, he felt a strong sense of sorrow because of the way Dolores acted. It was as if he had returned to the state when he had personally stabbed his parents to death. From the beginning to the end of the expedition, it only took half a day's time. However, to Dolores it meant everything had changed. After this moment of silence, Derrick retracted his gaze and continued forward. Subconsciously taking a few heavy steps at the same time, he thought of a rumor. Shepherd Elder Lovia once had a husband, but he died in expedition. This was very common to begin with and wasn't worth discussing. However, other than Lovia, the team that explored the ruins of the temple had all gone mad after they were eradicated. There were rumors that gradually spread amongst the residents of the City of Silver. During that expedition, Elder Lovia had eaten her husband. I won't be surprised. In the night, the low lighting frequency, the winds were rather cold. Derrick shivered and turned his attention back to the scene before him. He took a few steps and arrived to his destination. He raised his hand and knocked on the chief's door. "Come in," Collins Iliad said calmly. Derrick pushed open the door and entered. He saw the chief wearing a linen shirt and dark-colored coat, wiping his two swords with oil. Colin Iliad didn't stop. He raised his head and looked at Derrick. "What are your thoughts on the expedition?" What's the chief's motive for asking this? Having been influenced by Alger, Derrick subconsciously had a thought. Unable to grasp the true intention of the chief, he had no choice but to close the door and answer frankly. There might be other paths to the seaside. The palace where the Giant King should be very important. It's too dangerous. We need more information. Colin Iliad nodded and said, "The King of Angels and the other existence who call themselves deities secretly plotted together because they want to resist the Lord, and their success caused this land to be forsaken." Although Derrick had never directly heard such an interference, it wasn't difficult to come up with similar conclusions based on the various secrets he had learned from the Tarot Club. Yes, that should be the case. Colin fell silent. Even his act of wiping his sword slowed down. After a few seconds, he put down the item on his hand and took 2 steps forward. Those who participated in the conspiracy are still active on the other side of the sea. After a moment of silence, Derrick replied in deliberation. "Mostly, but not too much." Colin Iliad nodded, indicating that he had nothing else to ask. Derrick hurriedly said, "Chief, I obtained the incomplete formula of the Silver Knight potion, including the supplementary ingredients and the advancement ritual during Light Curler Merskogian's death." When he said this, Derrick knew that his lie sounded overly fake. He could be seen through right away because he didn't even dare to open his eyes back then. However, he just couldn't think of a better excuse. If Mr. Hangman were here, he would definitely have a better solution. I love Derrick and Alger. They are my favorite non-sibling dynamic. Just as this thought came to his mind, he heard the chief speak slowly. "Very good. What is it?" Derrick was stunned for a second before he hurriedly recounted in corresponding ritual and supplementary ingredients. Colin listened quietly as he let out a sigh. "You have contributed greatly this time. As an extremely important to the City of Silver, in the future our limit will be Sequence 3 and not Sequence 4, up to a certain range. The risk of expedition teams will be greatly reduced." Why will the risk encountered by the expedition teams be reduced, when the upper limit is Sequence 3 with a certain range? As Derrick was happy that he had made such a contribution, he couldn't understand Chief's words. However, he knew that this was something he didn't have the right to understand. He planned on asking around the tarot gathering later. He bid farewell and opened the door. "Derrick?" KK. "Derrick?" Colin Iliad suddenly called out to him. Derrick turned his head in puzzlement and found the chief's expression was rather solemn. Colin fell silent for a while before shaking his head. "Be careful of Lovia." "Like I fucking said." "Yes, Your Excellency," Derrick replied from the bottom of his heart. "Backlund, Northborough." Hazel actually, you know what? I don't mind her now. Casually sized him up and saw the monocle on his right. Eye. Come again? I did not skip 15 lines. That was the next fucking line. That was literally the next line. It literally went Backlund Northborough. Hazel sized him up and saw the monocle in his right eye. I was like, so scary. Bro, that's such a jump scare. Hazel's gaze instantly froze as she felt something rapidly expanding in her mind. It was about to tear apart an invisible barrier and spew out. She instinctively looked away and curled up slightly. Then she felt a ray of light shoot out from the depths of her heart, exploding into countless memory fragments in her mind as it howled, ranging back and forth. She suddenly remembered what had happened at home that day and recalled her father, mother, maid, servants wearing monocles or pinching their eye sockets. The indiscernible horror was so vivid as though she had been carved into her bones. The expression on Hazel's face crumbled as she curled into a ball as she trembled. The maidservant in the carriage was stunned, and she hurriedly stood up and reached out her hand in an attempt to help her up. No, Hazel trembled as she shouted with a nearby sharp voice. The maidservant was shocked and frightened. She couldn't root to the ground, not knowing how to react. After shouting, Hazel calmed down. She sat up and looked ahead in extreme fear. She saw the monocled postman... Oh, okay. I don't know. Enter another street, leaving only his back visible. I wasn't feeling well just now. I'm feeling much better now. Hazel turned her head and barely said to the maidservant. She realized that she wasn't as afraid as she remembered. It was as if she had already gotten used to the situation after some time. If not, I might have lost control just now. Why would I use the word lose control? Thankfully, I forgot those memories and didn't do anything eye-catching when I saw the postman. It took me 10 seconds to break down. If not, I might have been detached and something terrifying might have happened. Her thoughts flashed uncontrollably and her body trembled slightly. Miss, do you need to go to the clinic? The maidservant asked hurriedly. Hazel instinctively shook her head and her mind turned chaotic as she casually said, let's go to the Lowen Charity Bursary Foundation first. I remember there's a private clinic nearby. All right. The maidservant turned around and instinctively coachman to speed up. Hazel kept taking deep breaths in an attempt to regulate her tense motion, panic, and fear. It had to be said that it was somewhat effective. She seemed to have calmed down a little instead of breaking down immediately. At that moment, the sparrow had appeared above the carriage at some point in time. It squeezed its right eye and spat out a human language with almost no sound. She seems to have some unnecessary misunderstandings about me. It looks like T had some interactions with her before. Ah, she's a resident of Oakland Street. Interesting. Before long, the carriage arrived at Phelps Street. Seeing that the Lowen Charity Bursary Foundation wasn't far away. No, literally. Hazel suddenly said to the cathedral, turn towards St. Simon Cathedral first. I want to pray. She wanted to tell the bishop what had happened that day and what she saw today. In the gap of the carriage, a black ant moved its feeler on the right and whispered in a human voice. Humans nowadays are really lacking in creativity. They go to cathedrals at the first sight of any problem. I thought I would discover something if I followed her. Next time, I'll steal the cathedral in front of them. As he spoke, the other feelers of the ant moved as well. Hazel immediately forgot what she had just said and what she had just recalled. She had forgotten that she had met a postman wearing a monocle. She got off the carriage in entrance, and the Lowen Charity Bursary Foundation headed for the maidservant in tow. Clearly, her maidservant and her driver didn't remember the previous order. In the Lowen Charity Bursary Foundation, Audrey welcomed Hazel and brought her new friend into the activities she needed to help the injured soldiers in the front lines. As the World Garmin Sparrow had mentioned, the leader of the secret organization, Zuratel, and other angels were hidden in the backland. Audrey carefully gave up on the third stage of treatment for Hazel. She hoped that Hazel would recall what she had experienced for a time being and prevent any accidents from happening. Her current plan was to busy herself with charity work, helping others to make Hazel gradually brighten up and strengthen her ability to withstand psychological trauma. In the pirate-free city, Fours was drinking a high concentration of fruit wine that had locally produced recording when she had heard the encounters today. Her spiritual perception was triggered and she instinctively looked to the side. She immediately saw a figure appear in the void, quickly reforming. It was Garmin Sparrow in a half-top hat, black trench coat, and cold expression. So, bye, Audrey. It was really nice knowing you. Klein pressed his top hat and looked around. Do you want to leave? Four's eyes darted in her eye as her sighed before she said, all right. Over the past few days, she had already made preliminary records of the traits of the city that were different from other places. Without saying a word, Klein gestured to the items on the desk without his chin, indicating for Miss Magician to quickly pack up. Forrest didn't hesitate at all. She hurriedly organized her drafts as though she had heard an instruction. As he stood there and watched the other party busy, he suddenly said, "How's the progress with the horror story?" Forrest trembled indiscernibly before replying, "Soon, soon." Klein gently nodded his head. "How much longer?" "A week? No, 5 days. 5 days, tops," Forrest quickly replied. Klein didn't say anything else after Forrest picked up her drafts. Fountain pen, half a bottle of wine, and other memorabilia, he took 2 steps forward and grabbed her shoulder. Lucky bitch. Countless indiscernible figures flashed past him. Forrest felt a little more relaxed than before. She even attempted to record the travel. Before long, she returned to Backlund and returned to the alley where she had dispersed from before. She heard the word Game and Sparrow say, "Rest for a few days before setting off. Take note of any replies. Also, ask your teacher again if there are any information related to the Blood Emperor tutor, mainly about the various ruins." "All right." Forrest quickly agreed and thanked him. After separating from Cameron Sparrow, she returned to the street in Eastborough and entered the apartment that she shared with Shio. Shio put down the newspaper and looked at her friend. "Was it effective?" "Pretty good. I went to the Free City belonging to the pirates this time." Before Forrest could finish speaking, her expression changed slightly. "Give me coffee beans and a cigarette." "Why? Was it lacking there?" Shio asked in puzzlement. Forrest ran straight for the room inside and sat at the front desk. She opened her drafts and picked up a pen. Without looking back, she said, "For the sake of the new book, remember, to make a coffee." Forrest followed her to the bedroom when she heard that she opened her mouth but didn't say anything. In another spot in Eastborough, in a rented apartment with a similar layout, as Zeratil had already arrived in Backlund with it was unknown when Amon would be baited over. The Red Angel evil spirit true motives were unknown, and he was planning on preventing George III from becoming Black Emperor. On the one hand, Klein was trying his best to digest the bizarre sorcerer potion. On the other hand, he was making various preparations. At this moment, after handling the magician, he opened up a piece of paper and wrote, "Dear Mr. Azek, I've recently learned quite a bit of ancient history. I believe you will be very interested in it. Otherwise, I wouldn't have chosen to be a history teacher after losing your memories. This history involves some concealed secrets, so it's not convenient to describe them in a letter. When you wake up, I will share it with you in person. Also, I can create a charm called Yesterday Once More. Once used, you can find the past self through the historical void and borrow power from him. This is actually not something worth paying attention to. What's more important is that you can retrieve the memories from your past self. There's no need to decades to slow awaken them. I believe you will like it. I attached 2 with this letter. If you wake up, you can carry their effects. I'm currently in an environment filled with undercurrents. If you come over, please be careful. Please observe the situation in advance. On the matter of King George III advancing to Black Emperor, I will try to do something, but the chances of success are very slim. Finally, I wish you well. I also wish that you wake up soon. Your eternal student, Klein Moretti." After folding the letter, Klein stuffed 2 Yesterday Once More charms into the envelope. Following that, he took out Azek's copper whistle and blew it. The huge skeleton messenger immediately emerged from the floor and received the letter in his head and at the height lower than Klein. Klein nodded slightly and watched as the messenger disintegrated into the bones before disappearing. After doing all of this, he used his fingers and pulled out Will Septon's paper crane from his wallet. He wrote on the paper pencil, "I have something to ask you." He placed the paper crane under his pillow and lay it down on it with the help of cognition. He entered a deep sleep. In the depths of the pitch-black sharp tower, Klein once again met Will Septon, who was sitting in a black baby pram. "Dude, Bob's baby, in the house." Without waiting for the other party to speak, he directly asked, "Do you know who can provide the method needed to accommodate the uniqueness? What kind of price will it take?" "If the price is too high, then forget it," Klein added inwardly. Will Septon, who was sucking on his thumb, was taken aback. "You want to help me accommodate the die of probability?" Klein nodded seriously and said, "Regardless of whether it's a success or not, we should try our best." Just as he finished speaking, Will Septon's tears rolled down his cheeks. The chubby baby pouted in his hands and cried sadly. He whimpered and said, "It's useless. It's too late. I've already rebooted. And I still have to spend at least 22 years growing before I can accommodate the uniqueness. Why didn't you say that earlier?" "I'm really unlucky. I must have been like a silly snake or Ouroboros who took too much of my luck." As he listened to Will Septon's tearful complaints, Klein was at a loss of how to react. He could only remain expressionless. After the baby wrapped in silver silk calmed down, he asked in puzzlement, "Even if I said it earlier, it's useless. When I met you, you were already rebooted." "No, I was still Will Septon at that time. I didn't have Saris as my last name. I'd rebooted for a long time back then." And the chubby baby wiped his tears and said, "Although I'm still quite some time away from becoming an adult, as long as I'm willing to take a certain risk, it's not possible to accommodate it. With the luck I've accumulated, the risk can be resolved, but the difference now is just too great. There's no way to make up for it." No. My poor baby Will Septon. With a thought, Klein said after some deliberation, "Perhaps you can find an angel of the mortar pathway and steal time from them. Or steal time from you, allowing you to grow faster." Will Septon still choking as he shook his head and said, "It's useless. It's impossible for them to accurately steal my childhood and teenage years. If it's only a matter of time, it wouldn't allow me to grow. It'd only reduce my age I can originally live to. When the time comes, Will Septon Saris will die prematurely, having been born on June 1350 and dying October 1350 for the ripe old age of 4 months. But I've seen cases of aging rapidly due to theft of time." Klein recalled what he had seen in Amon's mausoleum. The chubby baby still shook his head. "No, that's just a manifestation of it being symbolized. If it's used on me, it'll just be a baby that starts and grows wrinkles while his hair turns white. To truly accurately seal the childhood and teenage years, it has to be Amon, and it has to be his true body in person." At this point, the baby wrapped the silver silk, and Klein fell silent at the same time. No one spoke for a long time. If there were to get Amon, the years that were possibly robbed wouldn't be limited to just childhood and teenage years. After a while, Klein took a deep breath, and without hiding anything, "Then there's no need to consider this for now. However, I still want to know where I can find a way to accommodate the uniqueness. If I have a chance to get it, I definitely can't miss it. Who knows when I might come in handy in the future." Will Septon put his tear-stained palm and sniffed. "There's no need to ask others. I've already gotten it long ago, but I can't do it. Otherwise, do you think that me being president of the Life School of Thought was for nothing?" Klein was surprised and curious. "Why can't you do it?" Will Septon pulled the blanket and the baby pram and said, "There's 3 ways to accommodate the uniqueness. One is to be born naturally with it, which is equivalent to being uniqueness coming to life and imbuing human form nature into it. The other is to make the uniqueness come to life to a certain extent before forcefully putting it into one's body, by relying on the power of this creator to suppress it. It will slowly take quite some time to slowly wear it down before one gets used to it and achieve the balance. The third is to concoct the uniqueness into an incomplete potion and drink it with the simplified apathesis ritual. There's no need to mention the first method. This is why those brothers are inviable. The second is impossible after the ancient sun god's death. The third is the only viable option at the moment, but for sequence 1 of the fate pathway, it depends on the machinations of fate. The first point was mentioned in Emperor Roselle's diary. It was said by Mr. Dorr. Does the second point mean that after the ancient sun god wielded so many authorities, he was at least half a level higher than the present true deities, or even 1 full level? The creator's level? As if his thought, Klein asked, "What do you mean by only depending on the machinations of fate? What has this got to do with me saying earlier that I can help you accommodate the uniqueness?" Will Septon's chubby baby face reeled a look of poignancy. The hypothesis of ritual for the fate pathway might be the simplest, or perhaps the most difficult. As long as we find the correct opportunity to torrent of fate, we can directly consume the potion and attempt to advance. But the potion lies in the fact that the exact opportunity cannot be divined or predicted. There's no way to lock onto it. I can only eliminate certain interferences and patiently search as an experienced life. I've already rebooted countless of times and I spent ages, but I still haven't encountered it. At this point, the baby's tears flowed down again. It sounds simple, but in fact, one can only rely on fate. In reality, depends on how well you look. With a sigh, Klein asked in enlightenment, "When I said that I would help you accommodate the uniqueness, did you vaguely grasp the opportunity?" The chubby baby cried even harder. Although I didn't really find it, I did sense it to a certain extent. Is that so? Back then, when Will Sefton came into contact with me, other than hoping to receive the help of yesterday once more, was it also pushed by luck? What a charlatan, Klein tersely acknowledged. Then there's no other way. You can only give me a few more of those charms. Will Sefton nodded heavily. All right, replied Klein generously. He then added, you have to give me a few paper cranes. With that said, the baby wiped the silver silk and Klein fell silent. In the rental apartment, after waking up from his dream, Klein got out of bed and walked to the room outside. He took out a pen and paper and began to write to Leonard. Yeah, he did. I obtained charms and I obtained charms and originate from the high sequence beyonder of the seer pathway. I obtained charms that originate from a high sequence beyond of the seer pathway. It allows someone to borrow powers from their former selves. Klein didn't mention that it might be something his dear poet needed, as if it was simply describing. After folding the letter, he took out the gold coin and rectangular diamond charm and blew some adventurous harmonica. Renette Tinker, who was wearing a dark and complicated long dress, walked out of the void of the four blonde, red-eyed heads in hand. All eyes were cast towards the Esther once more charm. The four heads spoke out one after another. Who to deal with this time? So direct. Klein sighed and smiled. It's unconfirmed yet. I'm going to attempt a foiling George III's plan. I might need your help in a critical moment. The four heads of Renette Tinker hands spoke one after another. This sounds extremely dangerous. Requires higher payment. More of these charms? The corners of Klein's forehead twitched as thoughts experienced the pain of tearing his soul apart. 3. Renette Tinker's head, who fell to join this final sentence, shook. Klein smiled and answered, no problem, but will take 1 to 2 weeks. Firstly, he had recently separated many worms at a time and made quite a number of yesterday once more charms. It made him feel like he was nearing his limit and needed some rest. Secondly, he felt that it would be another 1 to 2 weeks before he could digest the bizarre sorcerer potion and attempt to advance to Scholar of Yore once Miss Messenger's new book was published. When the time came, he might have a simpler method. Renette Tinker's foreheads began to bob with the help of their hair, indicating that this wasn't a problem. Klein then pointed at the letter in the gold coin. Send it to mailbox at 7 Pincer Street. He had previously divined that Leonard wasn't at home. Apparently he had gone south of the bridge. On the heads of Renette Tinker tilted up and sucked on the letter and gold coin, the yesterday once more charm onto her mouth. As he watched Miss Messenger enter the void and vanish from his room, Klein pondered for nearly a minute before beginning to set up a sacrificial bestowment ritual. Since the bizarro sorcerer potion was about to be completely digested, there was no doubt that he had prepared various ingredients for the Scholar of Yore in advance. Among them, the demonic wolf fog's transformed heart and white frost crystal could be obtained from the Evernight goddess. And the demonic wolf's transformed heart could go to the spirit world to bait the hound of Fulgrim. After a series of tasks, he finished setting up the altar and took 2 steps back to inspect the surroundings. It's still considered clean. In addition to the wall of spirituality seal, it satisfies the requirement of a ritual. I haven't made any contributions recently, so how should I ask for the bestowment? Could it be that I'm telling the goddess that I plan to take a credit loan and pay it installments? Will this be a little sacrilegious? I'll try to sacrifice something of value. If the goddess is willing to accept it, she will do corresponding bestowments. Something of value, as though he thought his thoughts moved to the junk pile above the gray fog. He really wanted to pack up the item he could sell for the time being, such a biology poison bottle, the interrogated Beyonder characteristics, lunatic Beyonder characteristics, Blather's Aura, 1000 base hunter blood, 6-wing gargoyle, eyeball, spirit world plunderer powder, and other items to sacrifice to the goddess in exchange for the material need to the Scholar of Yore. However, he felt like this would make the goddess seem like a rag and bone man. Hence, he could only give up this idea. It had to be roughly the same value. I can't use Roselle's travels. It hides quite a bit of secrets. Perhaps it will be of great use. Yes, the next time Little Sun and the others explore the Giant King's court, I can give them Roselle's ashes. This time, it wasn't sure how far they could go in expedition, and I was worried that they were unlikely to return entering the Roselle's travels. Sea God Scepter? That's even more important. Not only is it my most powerful sealed artifact, but it also involves the believers of the Sea God. It will be my anchor for some time. When I have other things, more anchors, I can be given to Mr. Hangman. Heaven or Imbus's Beyonder characteristic? This has already been promised to Miss Justice. After some thought, he realized that they didn't have many choices left. One was Life's Cane, and the other was Flaring Sun Charm, and the Fate Siphon Charm, Yesterday Once More Charms, and Control Spirit Bullets. The latter are all disposable items. If they're combined, their actual value wouldn't be comparable to the main ingredient of the Sequence 3 potion. Besides, once my ability to transfer wounds improves, it can take over the potion of Life's Cane effect. After hesitating for a while, he finally made a decision. What's he gonna give her? That's what I'm curious about. Or is she just gonna give it to him for free? That'd be cool if she was just like, hey, you know what? You've done so much for me, Klein. Have it as a freebie. After bringing... Here, I'll just rejoin it now. There we go. That way it's just done. After bringing the wood-colored cane back to the real world, Klein immediately began the ritual. Oh, he's giving her the cane? Interesting. He lit the candles and burned the corresponding essential oils and herbal powders and took 2 steps back. And skillfully recited the honorific name of the goddess. Finally, he said, I sacrifice this cane filled with life to you. I am willing to receive your blessings. He didn't directly mention the demonic wolf of fog's transformation heart or the white phos crystal. That was equivalent to making an equivalent exchange, not offering sacrificial items and praying for the bestowment. There was no need to be too meticulous in other aspects of the ritual, but this was the case in showing his attitude and fundamental level. He felt that he needed to be careful. When Klein finished his sentence, 2 out of the 3 candle flames swelled and intertwined, forming an illusory and dark mysterious door. The door slowly opened, creating strong, visible winds. They swept up the Life's Cane, allowing it to disperse into the seemingly endless cosmos through the gap of the illusory door. Immediately following that, there was a flash of 2 items tore through the barrier and landed on the altar without making a single sound. One of them was a strange heart formed of wisp and white mist. The other was a crystalline frost that emanated cold air. Klein was delighted as he hurriedly lowered his head and to thank the goddess for her bestowment. He then raised his head again. The dark and mysterious door had closed. It rapidly faded away, and the altar was completely restored to normal. It really succeeded. Klein heaved a sigh of relief and took 2 steps forward, putting away the demonic wolf and fog, transformed heart, and white frost crystal. At this moment, the relaxed him couldn't help but have a thought, as he absolutely couldn't say out loud. If he had known that it would go so smoothly, he wouldn't have had to use Life's Cane. That huge junk pile might have been enough. Perhaps I didn't need to sacrifice anything, and the goddess would have bestowed them to me. The present situation indicates that she is personally supporting me because of the Scholar of Yore. Of course, this way, if I receive too many bestowments, who knows what price I'll pay in the future. Using Life's Cane to trade for it makes me feel more at ease. Well, from the looks of it, before advancing in Sequence 2 and becoming an angel, the goddess will still shower her blessings on me. In the future, it will be hard to tell what kind of developments and changes will happen. With this in mind, he reined in his thoughts and ended the ritual and tidied up the altar. Then he began to plan out how to deal with the hounds of Fulgrim, the so-called Saphria castle keepers. The magic never performs unprepared. South of the bridge, Rose Street. Leonard changed into a black and white police uniform and wore a red glove. He led his team members and the real policemen to the only cathedral church of Earth Mother in Backlund. The epaulets he was wearing corresponded with the high-ranking inspector, but in fact his status as a captain of the Red Gloves team, he should be equivalent to a superintendent or even a chief superintendent. However, officers of their rank would involve themselves in such missions. Wearing those epaulets to the Harvest Church would cause arousal and suspicion to the public. After passing through the doors, Leonard scanned the area and realized that it was empty. There were only 2 figures. One was sitting at the front pew, focusing on praying. The second was a handsome man dressed in a priest's robe. He had black hair and red eyes, Emlyn White. Leonard nodded secretly, and he walked down the aisle to Bishop Butrovsky. He then coughed twice, making a half-giant bishop open his eyes and look over. I'm an inspector from the Backlund Police Department. Leonard showed his identification and said, We would like to invite you back to assist in our investigation. Father Trovsky stood up slowly and asked in a calm tone, despite looking down at him, What's the matter? The nearby residents reported your abnormal behavior, saying that it is possible that you're a spy for Faceac or Fainer Potter. Leonard explained the reasons he longed to come up with. At the same time, he was prepared to pull Bishop Petrovsky into a dream at any moment. Once he resisted, he would try to control the blessed in the shortest time possible. With the Red Gloves team distribution, as long as they didn't directly encounter a true demigod, even if they were faced a blessed who was in charge of a holy artifact, they would have the good chance of taking down their opponent. Furthermore, before Leonard sent off, he had applied for a grade 1 sealed artifact. This was also the reason why he had delayed taking action until today. Father Dropsies fell silent for 2 seconds before turning to look at Emlyn White, who was standing by the candle stand. Emlyn's side, complicated expression froze. He opened his mouth but didn't know what to say. Father Petrovsky retracted his gaze and nodded slightly. Okay. So cooperative. I thought we would experience an intense battle, and that we would have to be careful not to cause any casualties. Leonard was taken aback before he smiled. Thank you for your cooperation. If there really was a battle that ended up harming the blessed of Earth Mother, Leonard suspected that the tense situation would rapidly be aggravated. Through the ancient history of Roselle's travel and the various secrets he learned from the Tarot Club and the corresponding explanation of the old man Palaz, Leonard knew that the relationship between the Church of Earth Mother and the Church of Evernight was like a dried timber. It could be ignited with a tiny spark. When the time came, the history books would record today's events. The war would go from a localized problem to a fuse that ignited the globe. Leonard had lit the religious gunpowder keg. Seeing that Father Trotsky didn't resist and accepted the protective custody, Emlyn White secretly heaved a sigh of relief. He was very satisfied with his performance at the Tarot Club. Read more At this moment, the Red Gloves team member, Cindy, looked at Emlyn, who lacked a level of masculinity due to the gentleness of the soft moonlight. She lowered her voice and said, Sir, there's still a priest. Should we take him with us? Yes, we can't temporarily shut down the Harvest Church for some time to prevent any accidents from happening. Emlyn, Leonard. After a few seconds and repeated deliberation, Leonard finally said, if the spy case involves Fainer Potter, he would also be considered a suspect. Let's invite him back to assign him to investigations. Emlyn was stunned, unsure of what expression to show in response. East Borough, a 2-bedroom rental apartment. Forrest rubbed her dark circles, drank the last mouthful of bitter coffee. She stood up abruptly and began changing her clothes. Done writing? Shio, who was enjoying her breakfast, was taken aback. It had only been a day and a half. Forrest shook her head and took a deep breath. No. But I've already written the first volume. I can hand it over to the editor of the publisher. If it's serialized, there's no need to finish it all now. Shio thought and said, this is indeed a good idea. It can effectively reduce your stress. Forrest's expression twisted as she closed her eyes. I hope so. In another rental apartment a few streets away, after a series of tasks, Klein, who had come up with a plan to make his preparations, put on creeping hunger and quickly turned transparent as he entered the spirit world. Looking up, he saw 7 pure lights and comprised of 7 different colors. He released the arms of 2 of his marionettes and took out a box. He removed the wall of spirituality around it, allowing the aura of the demonic wolf Logrea transformed heart to emanate from it. Then he pulled Eniu, while Eniu pulled Konas together. The 3 of them rapidly teleported deep into the spirit world. Along the way, all kinds of strange spirit world creatures passed by them, like oil paintings that depicted hell. After an unknown period of time, Klein's premonition for danger suddenly stirred as a scene quietly appeared in his mind. Red, black, white, blue, and other colors saturated and overlapped as a slender figure suddenly appeared. It looked like a hound. Its entire body was covered in black shot fur, and its eye sockets were 2 balls in dark red burning flames. The ends of this mouth extended to the back of the head. It clearly existed there in a corporal form, but it gave off an illusory feeling and felt surreal. Hound of Fulgrim. Klein immediately turned around and faced it. He released his 2 marionettes at the same time, allowing them to wander in different directions. In the blink of an eye, the Hound of Fulgrim appeared. The 2 dark red flames, which weren't too deformed, but were absolutely terrifying, turned and looked at Klein. Right on the heels of that, its figure became more and more lustrous, illusory, and instantly disappeared as though it was a projection of history. It ran away just like that. As Klein muttered to himself in shock, he became even more wary of the possibility of a surprise attack. More than 10 seconds later, 2 figures phased into existence. They were covered in black fur and their eyes burning, and their corners of their lips extended to the back of their heads. However, there were only dark flames left in the eye sockets of each of the monsters. They remained fireballs where in their paws. Without waiting for Klein to retract, the 2 hounds of Fulgrim lay down in the void of the spirit world and wagged their tails. No, they wagged their tails? Oh my god! The bestest boys in the whole world! They wagged their tails. Klein's mouth was agape, wondering if he was dreaming. Oh my gosh. Please tell me he keeps them. Please tell me he keeps them and then he just has cool dogs. Oh my god. It's the bestest boys in the whole world. Oh my god, no! Does he get dogs? Does he get two little... Only after the two burning dark red fireballs floated over from the hounds of Fulgrim and landed in front of him did Klein snap back to his senses. He felt puzzled and relieved. Why did they harm themselves to come up with a pair of eyes for me? They seemed to be thick and sticky blood surrounding them. Oh my god. If this is their trap, I would have already stepped into it. No, dude, the way if that was a trap, that one would have got me. If there was just some cute little doggos. To think that I fell into a daze for a few seconds. This is a fatal mistake for a bizarre sorcerer in battle. However, no matter who it is, it's inevitable that they will have similar reactions when encountering something like this for the first time. The terrifying enemy who they had meticulously planned to deal with ended up kneeling down and wagging their tails the moment they see them. It's like a dream. This performance is very similar to a Rhodes. Could the great existence above the spirit world be able to showcase special traits in the spirit world? As thoughts flashed through his mind, he looked up in the two dogs that were prostrating themselves in the void and wagging their tails. He stretched out a left hand and grabbed the two dark red flames and large amounts of thick red blood. The moment he came into contact with these things, he suddenly heard a familiar ravings and roars. They were sometimes shrill, sometimes dull, sometimes maniacal. Fuck, I can't say that word. Sometimes seductive, sometimes crazy, sometimes ethereal. Immediately following that, the illusory grayish-white fog appeared in front of him. The fog spread out in all directions. Above them, there were towering, majestic palace and looked like a god's residence. This was a very familiar scene because every time he entered the mysterious space above the great fog, he would pass through it. In the beginning, it was difficult for him to notice his surroundings after he took 4 steps counterclockwise. However, as he got used to it, and with the advancements of his sequence, he was able to easily take the opportunity to observe the phenomenon. And at that moment, Klein had chanted the honorific name of celestial worthy in heaven and earth for blessings, or taken 4 steps counterclockwise. This made him extremely wary. Then he saw the few figures appear in the endless gray fog. They overlapped with the gray fog at times, while spreading at other times. They were none other than the hounds! Oh my god! Of Fulgrim, with their eyes burning with their dark red flames and their bodies covered in short black fur. The 2 hounds of Fulgrim had lost one eye each, returned to their companion's side, and blended into the dark spot in the gray fog. The entire phenomenon vanished as well in the depths of the spirit world. Klein realized that there was no longer any hounds of Fulgrim around him. Only his 2 marionettes and strange... No! Bring back the dogs! And strange spirit world creatures remained. Oh my god, I love them so much. Literally the bestest boys in the whole book. Klein lowered his head and looked at the eyeballs and blood in his hands. With the persistence, he confirmed that what had just happened experience was not an illusion. The hounds of Fulgrim are also known as Saffrey Castle Keepers. They live in the historical void. I saw them active with the gray fog. Before fusing with the dark spots, combing what he had seen and heard, Klein gradually came to a bold conclusion. Perhaps Saffrey Castle is referring to the mysterious space above the gray fog. It's referring to the strange door of light. As for the gray fog, it's a symbolic object formed from the history of the spirit world. There's void gaps present in it. Every time I enter the mysterious space above the great fog, I leave certain traces there, making the hounds of Fulgrim no longer feel unfamiliar with me. Oh my god, because they recognized his scent! They see me as their owner? They see me as the owner of the Saffrey Castle. So when they saw me, they immediately offered me what I needed and shook their tails to gain my favor. After a day of planning, asking about the solution, and inviting helpers, I ended up targeting my own guards. Oh my god, bring them back. I want them now. As he thought of this, he inexplicably felt a sense of absurdity at the situation. That's what I'm saying. Klein, go get your dogs. Those are your dogs. They chose the owner. Just so you're aware. If a dog chooses an owner, you can't get rid of it. That's literally just, it's the rule. It's the rule. It's the rule. I didn't make the rules, I just abide by them. The fool above the grey fog was reaching out his hands to fleece someone, only to accept fleecing himself. Saffra Castle. Although this development makes me even more afraid, in any case, I still have some understanding of the owner of the grey fog in mysterious space. The unknown is the most terrifying thing. After standing silent in the depths of the spirit world, for I want a dog so bad. Bro, I want a dog so bad. Exhaled to summon the two marionettes back. He planned on waiting for the bizarre sorcerer potion to completely digest before attempting to seek out relevant knowledge about Saffra Castle and roads and other places. When the time came, if anything were to happen, he could use advancement to fight it. Eastborough, a 2-bedroom rental apartment with her dark circle eye. Klein's just playing with dogs while Forrest is just going through it. With their dark eye circles. No, but that's the thing. I want a dog to howl at the moon and the ghosts in my room. Because could you imagine I'm just sitting here reading, and then in my lap is a little puppy, and then he just sits there and he's just all happy, and we're just hanging out, and then it's just my dog. It'd be perfect. With her dark eye circles, Forrest returned to retrieve the day's newspaper and letter in passing. How was it? Shio asked him, returned to home for lunch. Asked Forrest, covered her mouth and yawned. Not bad. The editor I know is very satisfied with the new book's topic and writing style. He decided to arrange for serialization as soon as possible. You might not be aware, but the horror stories of Backlund hospitals have been very popular recently. Best-selling author had gained inspiration from it and is beginning to serialize similar stories. I'm actually not the first to do so. This is a good thing. Shio thought about it and nodded seriously. This meant that Forrest, who was also writing a horror story of Backlund hospitals, would attract too much attention. Her new pen name wouldn't be tested either. I know. Forrest threw the newspaper aside and took a few letters that were stuffed in it before quickly flipping through them. Soon she found a reply letter from her teacher, Dorian Gray Abraham. Forrest's expression immediately turned solemn as she quickly tore open the envelope. Mine would. He would sit so well. He would just sit on my lap, and he would just hang out with me, and he would be the bestest boy in the whole world. She opened the letter and began reading. Benjamin Abraham is from Intis. He lived in Roselle's era. Apart from the mysticism, knowledge, and small amount of inheritance, I didn't leave anything of value behind. Later on, everything was destroyed by the Aurora Order. I'm unable to provide the corresponding information. Mr. Cameron Sparrow is about to be disappointed. Forrest pursed her lips and pulled off the magic trick, burning the letter in her hand to ashes. Then she began writing a reply, asking the teacher if she knew about the secret ruins of the Blood Emperor list to tutor. Klein went above the grey fog and listened to Miss Magician's prayers. The trail of cues for Benjamin Abraham have come to the end. It's all the fault of those lunatics from the Aurora Order. At the same time, he learned that the serialization of the horror stories of Backlund Hospital. After returning to the real world, and just as he was about to head out for a meal, he suddenly saw Miss Messenger walk out of the void with 4 heads in her hand. One of them had a letter in its mouth. Who sent it? Asked Klein in puzzlement. Renette Tinker, remaining 3 heads, replied, A seduced idiot. Who was that? Klein grew confused as I was trying to figure out too, but I maybe have an idea. He took the letter and opened it. The mastermind behind those matters is George III. His goal is to become Black Emperor. Are you interested in stopping this matter? Trissy. Trissy? The demoness actually dares to write me a letter. Isn't she afraid of being caught by Miss Messenger on the spot? Alright, Miss Messenger just said that the sender was a seduced idiot. Trissy seduced a man and got him to help her summon the messenger, while she hid far away and waited for the other party to contact her through the mirror. She's pretty smart. She really is persistent in investigating this matter. Isn't she afraid that she'll be killed by either me or George III? The man should be a beyonder. It would be quite difficult for an ordinary person to hold a summoning ritual. After all, it relies on one's spirit body, or spirit or spirituality. Clyde was first puzzled before he came to realization. Immediately following that, he began wondering why Trissy managed to guess that George III wanted to become Black Emperor. Without sufficient mysticism knowledge and without knowing the Black Emperor's apotheosis ritual or the corresponding history, even a demigod would find it difficult to guess. It definitely wasn't as easy as Red Angel Evil Spirit had said. Could it be that Trissy had other helpers, or could it be that she had obtained more powerful than the primordial demoness, including all sorts of knowledge and secrets? Klein frowned slightly as he felt that there was something amiss. If there was a chance, it would definitely get rid of Demoness Trissy. After thinking for more than 10 seconds, he took out a piece of paper and pen from his pocket and scribbled a reply. I'm interested, but I don't know what you want me to do. In the Backland Bridge area, a man in his 30s looked in horror, and the headless woman, no, the four-headed demoness, appeared before him and dropped a letter. All the messages of a mysterious world were so terrifying. Only about 5 minutes after Renette Tinker left did the man catch his breath. He picked up the letter and opened it to take a look. During this process, his gaze gradually burned because it meant that he could meet the beautiful woman again. According to his instructions, he waited until the evening before he took out a black, sticky lump. He separated them and applied them evenly onto a mirror. A few seconds later, the mirror turned dark and as if it was connected to another world. In the blink of an eye, the mirror pressed the room in the complete different form and present environment. There was a young girl dressed in a dark black dress. She was none other than Demoness Trissy. The man who was finished with the ritual immediately revealed the infatuated expression as he subconsciously whispered. The reply said that he's interested. The light dimples on the sides of Trissy's cheeks slowly bloomed and making the mirror appear brighter. Her eyebrows relaxed as she said, I'll send you a letter. Forward it to Gawain Sparrow. You absolutely cannot read its contents. After obtaining the man's unhesitated promise, Trissy stretched out her right hand and swiped it across the mirror, causing the dark, aqueous light to disappear. She immediately found a pen and paper and deliberated for a few seconds before quickly writing. The secret mausoleum needed for George III's ritual should be from Black Emperor Lister Tudor, and there is an existence who understands it very well. It might be able to help us successfully infiltrate the cause damage during the ritual. I have a way to contact the existence, but we have to wait until the next full moon. What you need to do is provide me some blood, hair, flesh, or bones from the descent of Abraham family. Trissy. Oh my god. Oh my god, can I not spell? Can I not? No, I couldn't. I was really struggling there for a minute. I don't know what she's doing, honestly. Also, hi everybody who joined. I don't know what she's doing. Truthfully and honestly, I think sometimes when I read this, I just, in my brain, I'm like, let her do what she's doing. She'll either die or she won't. And so far, she hasn't died. So I don't know. East Borough in a 2-bedroom rental apartment. After receiving the reply from Demoness Trissy from Miss Messenger, Renette Tinker, he pulled the chair to sit down and began reading. He keeps dying today. I don't know why. Is she not happy? She's not happy. You know what? I'm wondering, what if it's not me, but it's you? You know? What if it's actually your fault that it keeps dying? And it's not mine. Wouldn't that be crazy? This means that she knows of Mr. Door's existence. She has wave-used the bloodline. Sir? No. Don't you dare. It was starting to glitch, and I was like, don't you dare. No, because that's the thing, is like, honestly, I think everything that goes wrong is actually your fault. Ever think of that? That it's actually all your guys' fault? Who would have known? This means that she knows of Mr. Door's existence, and she has a way to use the bloodline of Abraham family to communicate with that entity. Trissy can already withstand Mr. Door's cry for help. Isn't she afraid of losing control because of this? Besides, she seems to be very sure of Mr. Door's identity. She really has obtained... more knowledge and secrets from the primordial demoness, but in such a situation, why would the demoness of White, Katerina, be pursuing her? Questions arose in Katerina's mind as she read the short letter. As Trissy His vague mention of the matter was within the understanding. She believed that she wasn't lying in the aspects. Furthermore, she had provided a very feasible solution. Of course, the prerequisites for this method to succeed was obtaining the correct ritual of the descent of the Abraham family, be willing to take on a huge risk, and use something related to the bloodline of the medium. For these 3 points, it was missing the first point. It still had some doubts about the third point. He attempted to find a safer and more concealed method, but Demoness Trissy seemed to only lack the second point. To me, it's easier to find the descendant of the Abraham family. I can directly contact them through Miss Messenger. However, once I hand over the hair, blood, flesh, and bones to Demoness Trissy, this will put them in risk of being hexed. Klein understood the Demoness pathway rather well and knew that they were very good at hexes. As his thoughts raced, he gradually became fucking hell. As his thoughts raced, he gradually came up with a countermeasure. It was to use the hair, flesh, and bones of the deceased. He remembered that Miss Messenger had mentioned that she had once buried the old man named Lawrence. He was undoubtedly a descendant of the Abraham family. I hope it wasn't a cremation, although it was somewhat sacrilegious to... Is he gonna dig up a corpse? Fun fact, him doing this is probably like one of the least illegal and scandalous things that Klein has done since he's come here. Speaking to Mr. Dorr is necessarily... Yeah, that's what... He's done so much worse. This is actually not even that bad. Why get your hands dirty when you can manipulate other people to do it for you? Honestly, low-key, Klein and Trissy, it's kind of a power couple right there. Mr. Dorr is necessarily the procedure to dispel the Abraham family's ancient curse. It's better to be use the dead rather than implicate the living. When time comes, I'll add this to Trissy's reply. I'll claim that this is a requirement stipulated by the descendant of the Abraham family for the ritual medium. Also, I have the first confirmed that Trissy is going to speak to Mr. Dorr and not attempt to pull him back to the real world. They are either of the high level or involved in a high level solution. It would be difficult to obtain any effective relationship during divination, but Emperor Roselle said that the ritual required to facilitate Mr. Dorr's return is very complicated. It definitely can't be set up by a smaller number of descendants. I can get Queen Mystic and Miss Sharon to monitor Backland's underground market and see if there are any abnormal trades of materials and personnel. Klein nodded slightly and decided to find Miss Messenger in a while. He could also rush her writing. Northborough, Phelps Street. On the bench, a young man in the black trench coat and silk top hat was sitting there with a thin face and broad forehead. He looked at a withered and yellow intis parasol tree in a daze. I'm changing it. No! On the bench, a young man in a black trench coat and silk top hat was sitting there in a thin face and broad forehead. He looked... I just understood. Parasol tree in a daze. He wore a crystal card monocle in his right eye, looking rather refined. At that moment, the elder who was heading to St. Samuel Cathedral stopped in his tracks when he saw something was amiss. He asked gently, "Young man, what are you worried about? You lost something in this war?" He suspected that the young man's relative's lover or friend had died in the air raid during intense battles in the front lines. That is why he was sitting alone by the side of the tree, looking lost. The young man raised his hand and pinched his monocle. He sighed and shook his head. "I'm just thinking about something rather complicated questions." "Are you a philosopher?" The old man was taken aback as he blurted out, "No, but I often bring up philosophical problems for others. Just like, who am I? Where am I? And what's my future?" The young man smiled calmly as he continued to ponder. From time to time, he would purse his lips and whisper silently. The elder could understand him and could only shake his head. Under the gaze of the stray dogs, sparrows, ants, and microbes in the air, he slowly left. The young man didn't turn his head. His monocle reflected yellow leaves that were floating down as he muttered to himself. To parasitize? To not— No fucking way! I love this man so much. But not actually. To parasitize? To not parasitize. To parasitize? To not parasitize. See the bait? Devour the bait. See the bait? Devour the bait. after getting the hair from Lawrence's remains. Oh my god, bro. He doesn't stop. No, literally. I just love he's like, he should have just had like a flower in his hand. To parasitize, to not parasitize, to parasitize. Fucking, my god. Seeing the horror stories of Backlund hospitals being serialized in Tussock Times, Klein entered the patient state. He also promised to send his messenger a new place next week to record new sights and customs. Soon, a new week had arrived. After having his lunch, he planned to take a short nap and prepare for 3 o'clock tarot gathering. At this moment, Renette Tinker, who was holding 4 blonde, red-eyed heads, walked out from the depths of the void. Oh my god. He's just a happy little guy. Do we just keep going back and forth from like Amon just collecting so many more? Dude, what did anything, like, we had this whole thing where we got rid of all of Amon's avatars. We risked Leonard's life, we risked Palaz getting discovered, we risked all of it for literally nothing. For literally nothing. Not even 100 chapters later, Amon's like, do I feel like ruining everybody's day today? Or do I feel like getting ice cream? How many people do I want to terrorize today? Well, I do have a nail appointment in 3 hours, so I might only be able to get half of the entire population. Them had a linen bag in his mouth. Who sent it? Klein suddenly had an inexplicable feeling. He had complicated premonition. No, literally. Premonition as he didn't immediately reach out and receive the bag Miss Messenger was holding. Renette Tinker's 3 free heads spoke one after another. The real mutated king of mushrooms. Frankly! The string of words roughly understand what's going on. Klein controlled his expression, not baring his teeth, and slowly took the bag. When he opened the bag, he wasn't surprised to see copious amounts of demons. No, mushrooms. Yes! Their descendants will be divided into 2 categories. The first type will accumulate various kinds of poisons that can be eaten. However, they can be used as I love Frankly. I remember when I was like in volume 2 and I didn't know who Frankly was yet. I didn't know who a lot of these people were. Had no idea. Are there any characters that I still don't know? Probably. But I love Frankly so much. The other types can be used for food after being cooked at high temperatures through boiling, stewing, and frying. You must remember not to eat it raw or before it's cooked. Otherwise, they will proliferate in your body, using your flesh and blood as a hotbed. In consideration of having a variety of flavors, I've invented 11 kinds of mushrooms. Some are rich in milk. This can be directly drunk. Some are like beef. When frying them, there's no need to provide an extra oil. Some are as delicate as fish meat, but without the bones. My suggestion is to roast or boil it. No, Frankly is the scariest motherfucker in this universe. I would rather go up against the true creator himself than Frankly. Put me, Amon, the true creator, Adam, ancient sun god, like 8v1, rather than go up against Frankly and his mushrooms. I'm good. All of these wouldn't be possible without your help. If I hadn't already advanced and become a druid, I might have taken a few years or even more than a decade to dissolve all the problems I encountered during the experimentation process. If you have any other ideas that are suitable for me, please share them with me. Your friend forever, Frankly. And I love that Frank is just like, that's my best friend. Like, I don't know what you guys heard. That is my ride or die best friend. He's actually my business partner, and we do experiments together. It's great. With the letter in hand, Klein felt silent for a long time. He looked up and realized that Miss Messenger was still waiting. He sighed silently and walked to his desk. He took out a piece of paper and a pen and slowly wrote, I'm very happy that you succeeded. These mushrooms will help me greatly. They will effectively reduce famine in certain areas. I'm currently busy with some matters, so I don't have any news for now. Your friend, Gairman Sparrow. After folding the letter, he looked at Miss Messenger and hesitantly asked, How's Frank Lee's condition like now? The head of Brunette Tinker had previously failed to say anything, spoke first. Excited, the other three heads added. Animated, happy, satisfied. Following that, the four heads said, no longer afraid of being buried in soil. Why? The four blonde heads in Renette Tinker's hands spat out a word by word. He can extract the soil's nutrients and oxygen. Frank's art really evolved quite a bit after becoming a druid. For a moment, Klein wasn't sure if he should be happy for his friend or if he should grieve for the crew of the future. As he watched Miss Messenger leave, Klein forced himself to sleep through cognition. Then he woke up at 2:30 p.m. to prepare for this week's tarot gathering. At 3 o'clock, dark red beams of light rose up from the ancient palace above the grey fog and solidified in the corresponding figures. Audrey immediately stood up, curtsied, bowed towards the end of the long bronze table. Good afternoon, Mr. Fool. As a senior psychiatrist, she had great control over her emotions. Furthermore, she hadn't encountered any problems this week. She was mainly speaking out of donations, contracting pharmaceutical factories, and organizing medical volunteers. However, compared to the past, the cheerful and happiness she had when making her greeting had decreased significantly. The Fool Klein nodded slightly in response and to greetings from the members of the Tarot Club. Following that, he cast his gaze at the Hermit. He still owed this lady 8 questions. Cattleya bowed her head and said with an unfathomable attitude, Honorable Mr. Fool, there are still 2 questions this time. After obtaining approval, she continued. The first question is, what is the state of the devils in the abyss? Queen Mystic's first suspicion is that the Emperor's mausoleum is hidden in the abyss. This is identical to the Emperor's train of thought. She is indeed a biological daughter. Unfortunately, there is no citizens that can be controlled there. The Fool Klein muttered to himself inwardly and answered with an unchanging expression. The current abyss is a place most devils are unable to live in. We're getting a tarot gathering. There is, not much left of this book. Which is crazy. I truly never thought I would make it this far. The current abyss is a place most devils are unable to live in. Upon hearing Mr. Fool's reply, Cattleya and company inevitably felt a deep sense of shock. In mysticism, the abyss was covered by all of the most corrupted and most disorderly place. It was where the devils lived, but now... Yeah... That's what I've been told, is that, the last little bit, because I have volume 6, 7, and... I only have 3 volumes left. Oh my god. I only have 3 volumes left. That's crazy. And the volumes aren't that big, the last little bit. Inevitable felt sense of shock. In mysticism, the abyss was considered to be all the most corrupted and most disorderly place. There were devils lived now. Most of the natives were unable to survive in there. In the environment in the abyss worsening, causing the devils to be unable to adapt to it, or it's because the situation regarding the corruption, chaos, and degeneration has improved, making the abyss no longer suitable for devils to live in. Alger quickly had 2 theories, but he didn't know which one was which. The hermit Cattleya shared the same thought as him. But she was even more puzzled as why the queen would ask such a question regarding Mr. Fool's answer. It seemed to have a deeper meaning to it. One that could help the queen in understanding whatever agenda she had, and its secrets. As for justice, she suddenly thought of the Church of Knowledge prophet demigod. He had once said that the end of the world would arrive in 1368 in the 5th epoch. This was publicly acknowledged by the Beyonders, who were good at making prophecies. Even the deities had agreed on it. In 1350 this year, there were only 18 from the apocalypse. Hence, there are no signs of the abyss appearing. The chaotic and degenerate environment that is originally filled with the abstract meanings has broken past its limit, becoming even worse. Audrey had a rough deal of the situation, and this added to her slightly anxiety and unease. As there weren't any signs of the apocalypse in the beginning, she didn't put too much weight on the matter. She usually paid more attention to the current wars, casualties, and victims of suffering, but now the anomaly within the abyss had left her inexplicably horrified. She desperately wanted to improve herself. She wanted to finish digesting the potion and obtain the bionic characteristics left behind by having her ambits in advance to becoming a demigod. Only then could she have the abilities to interfere and resist certain things that she didn't want to have happen. Mr. World entrusted me with more tasks. Audrey silently prayed in her heart and secretly placed the restless emotions. The members such as Leonard, Forbes, and Chio actually had some doubts about whether the Abyss really existed. That was because after the Second Epoch, the Abyss had never related itself to the world again. The most active devils in the real world had come from the Blood Sanctify sect. Even the high-level devils and even the existence and ritual pointed to were likely to be the highest echelons of the Blood Sanctify sect. Of course, the evil god in the dark side of the universe was widely regarded as the embodiment of the Abyss, but his presence was extremely low. If he hasn't occasionally responded to the ritual and showed the characters of the devil, he would probably be considered a pure legend like the giant King Armir. But even so, the secret of the Church of Evernight that Leonard could come in contact with also has shown that it was possible for the dark side of the universe was a disguise used by the other evil gods and hidden existences. This wasn't surprising to Derrick. In certain places some distances away from the City of Silver, deep in the endless darkness, there were many devils that were unable to maintain their calm states. There were no lack of demigods like the demons that weren't too different from the Abyss, if not for the different fact of the giant King's Court and the other iconic items existed. The City of Silver citizens would definitely have suspected that the truth behind them being abandoned was that they had been thrown into the Abyss. As the thoughts flashed through the members' minds, Catley restrained her doubts and continued asking. Honorable Mr. Fool, the second question is, did the thing from the Emperor Roselle do in his later years have an external unnecessary influences? This question reminded Klein of the shocking detail in Roselle's later diary entries. Immediately he sighed. With the posture of the fool, he slowly shook his head. No, those things were what the Emperor wanted to do. Just as Catley felt an uncontrollable sense of disappointment and sadness when she heard Mr. Fool smile with a sigh. It wasn't due to the external influencer, but due to the corruption. It's very difficult to detect, even for him. Corruption. Emperor Roselle was corrupted in his later years. At that time, he was already a grounded angel. What could he corrupt? Is this from the particular true god of the underground? Corruption that even the ancient gods feared. Amidst the shock, Audrey came with a guess based on the secrets she knew. Aldra and the other members of the Tarot Club didn't expect such a thing to happen to Emperor Roselle in his later years. They began to suspect his purpose behind him creating the Cards of Blasphemy. At the same time, he believed that Mr. Fool's search of the Cards of Blasphemy might contain deeper motives, but more than that, they had originally deduced. In the game that involves the entire world, only important figures like Mr. Fool have the right to become a player, and we are only a card or some chip. The King of Angels and Sequence 1 Angels might be qualified to participate. Alger sighed as he had the desire to become a player. The story of the Emperor's later years went from being a tyrant to an evil god. The book that starts off with romance, motive, passion, love, adventure, and even a decadent lifestyle into high society later turns into a horror story. I wouldn't even dare write something like that. If it were me writing it, I would make the Emperor's final tragic end stem from betrayal of one's love. A marriage betrayal, betraying of an oath. Forrest couldn't help but let her thoughts go wild. She even had the urge to start writing a set of chronicles from Emperor Roselle. Of course, there were quite a number of Roselle chronicles from the market. Some of them were even prohibited items, corrupted. So it's because of corruption. Catley sighed and felt sorrowful. She saw with emotion. In the end, the Emperor didn't end up like the story of the dragon slaying warrior he had spoken out from being a hero. He turned into an evil dragon. He was still a legend worthy of worship, but that said, the sad thing was that up to today, the misunderstanding was finally beginning to be resolved. After her emotions settled down, Catley recalled the matter of being corrupted. The more she thought about it, the more horrified she became. She believed that she was one of the members of the Tarot Club who knew Roselle the best. She knew very well that what height this Emperor had reached in his later years. Of course, Mr. Fool was the convener, a witness, and not a member. However, Sequence 1 angels such as him, someone who made the throne of divinity a target, and being slightly corrupted, he and the people around him didn't notice it at all. This is much more terrifying than it is horrific. Catley secretly took a deep breath before slowly exhaling and regulating her emotions. Then she bowed towards the end of the long molten table. Thank you for your answer, Honorable Mr. Fool. I'm also thankful that you didn't ask anything beyond my means. The Fool Klein gave a self-deprecating laugh as he leaned back in his chair and nodded slightly. You may begin. Just like the previous gatherings, the member of the Taros either had just advanced or were digesting. They didn't have any trades to do, and they didn't need anything for the time being. After exchanging a few looks, they decided to directly enter a free exchange segment. Of course, Emlyn was a special exception. He really wanted to make a request to get someone to start a deal break for him, free him from the basement of St. Samuel Cathedral. No, not Emlyn stuck in the basement again. Not Emlyn stuck in the basement of another church, getting converted to another religion. Yes, to this day, he was still under protective custody behind Chanis Gate at the Backland headquarters of the Church of Evernight. In the neighboring cell was Bishop Petrovsky, and during the period of time, no Nighthawk had come to interrogate him. If not for the people in charge of guarding the sealed area, bringing them water and food every day, Emlyn definitely would have believed that he and Father Petrovsky had already been forgotten. The dark, silent environment is still alright. Free my boy, he ain't do nothing! No! Kami, we both know who should come and free Emlyn. Get on his little boat, make his way to Backland, free his boy. Somebody get on AO3 real quick. That's all I'm saying. Yet he ended up also being brought into protective custody. I hope that fellow hasn't forgotten about me and is thinking of a way to get me out. Emlyn glanced at the star Leonard and maintained his silence. Leonard maintained his posture and didn't respond to the moon's gaze. There was nothing he could do for the time being. This was because he was the one who raised the term protective custody in front of the Archbishop. As for Emlyn, he was in a vampire Viscount, equivalent to a Sequence 5 Beyonder. He was a mobile humanoid bomb that also believed in Earth Mother. There was no reason for him to be released immediately. I can only wait for the Sanguine to protest through the other channels before I have the authority to handle this matter. The Star Leonard decided to apply for private exchange later and get Emlyn to think of a way to get the upper echelons in the Sanguine to contact the Church of Evernight. Their interaction had been noticed by Justice. She immediately thought of the question Mr. Moon had asked her last time. She suspected that something had gone wrong during the protective custody operation, but it didn't seem too serious. I heard that the priest of the Harvest Church saved quite a number of people during the Great Smog of Backland. I hope nothing bad happens. Audrey nodded slightly and cast her gaze to Little Sun. The other members of the Tarot Club also cast their gaze towards the son Derrick. They knew that the City of Silver had planned on exploring the Giant King's court last week, so their likely results were out. The son Derrick sat up straight and glanced at Mr. Hangman before saying in a very natural manner, "We've completed our first exploration of the Giant King's court. 3 dead, 1 missing, 5 survivors. We first arrived at the front door of the King's court and saw 2 silver knights in the unknown state standing ground there. This was the name Giant Pathways Secret 3. Two Sequence 3 demigods were guarding the main door. As expected, the Giant King's court, the Divine Kingdom of an ancient god, the member of the Tarot Club suddenly felt a similar feeling. As for the son Derrick, he didn't pause and he continued his recount. To him, he was shocked when he first discovered the 2 silver knights guarding the main door of the Giant King's court. However, the series of events that followed made it extremely ordinary, making it difficult to stir up emotions. According to what Mr. World shared, we followed a rather hidden path to the back of the Giant King's court. The monsters we encountered were mainly wraiths. They were restrained by the unshadowed crucifix. After we arrived at the waiting forest, we tried to explore it, and we discovered that the remnants of the Giant King, Will, and the Divine Kingdom powers had formed an evil spirit to protecting its parents' mausoleum. Derrick skillfully recalled this exploration during the expedition. The members of the Tarot Club, Alger, Audrey, and others quickly regained their thoughts of the Silver Knight guards and listened attentively. They were all interested in the secret hidden in the waiting forest. They wanted to know what the ancient god and Giant King tried to keep from him and his queen and child. Thinking back to the scene. Oh, let's fucking go! Yee! Yippee! Thinking back to the scene he had seen, Derrick paused for a moment before saying, after purging the evil spirit, he came to the mausoleum of the Giant King's parents. There was a stone stele erected. Yeah, and they're all actually Amon's avatars. They're not real people. Yay. for the tomb and coffin and had long been opened by someone revealing the corpse inside. Guys, I'm so scared. Amon is terrifying. Revealing the corpse inside, they were corpses of two humans. Corpses of humans. The tomb of the Giant King's parents had corpses of humans buried inside. Godfather and godmother. No, they weren't any religion back then. As a demigod who knew plenty of mysteries, the hermit Catlia's first reaction was that the two corpses had another identity. Immediately following that, she recalled that the queen had mentioned it was a question of Emperor Roselle had asked, as though he had been talking to himself when he was alive. When did the ancient documents of the historical records refer to the giants, elves, vampires as humanoid creatures or anthropod creatures? Why did they refer to humans as giant-like, elf-like, or vampire-like creatures? I'm also curious about that. Could it be that all humanoid creatures had descended from humans? The giants, elves, and vampires were the mutations brought by bionic characteristics and could eventually become inherited. Catlia instantly calmed her emotions as she seriously considered the possible reasons. At the moment, she felt that her potion would be digested due to a certain degree once she returned to the real world. It will. This is because the sequence for the mystery prior pathway was called Mysticologist, and the origins of the giants and humanoid creatures were without a doubt extremely valuable. They were mysticism knowledge, and most ordinary demigods had no way of knowing. The Giant King's parents were humans. That must be fake. Alger immediately suspected that someone had fabricated the scene. However, on second thought, this act not only required the real remains to be taken away and replaced with human remains, but one had to prepare a suitable coffin to make the tomb look like it didn't belong to the giants. Furthermore, fabricating it was pointless. This wouldn't affect reality too much. Alger felt that no one would be as bored to do something like this. To be able to enter the Giant King's court and suppress the powerful evil spirit, the person that approached the two graves was at least a bare saint, meaning that they had long passed the age of pulling pranks. Could it be that the ancestors of all creatures were humans? This included elves, as he had seen too many shocking things at the Terror Club, as well as suffering the religious breakdown from these murals on the primitive island. Alger didn't have overly intense emotions run through him. He just couldn't help but raise his hand and touch his dark blue hair. Mr. Hangman connected himself to the matter. The Giant King's parents are actually humans. From the looks of it, most of the creation myths are fake. They were all fabricated by future generations, however, there were also hidden meanings in them. Mr. Moon seemed to find it unacceptable. Mr. World seemed to have knowledge about this long ago. With the help of placate and other psychology techniques, Audrey was able to compose herself the fastest, and she instinctively observed the reactions of other members. At that moment, Emlyn, who was the most restless, his mind was filled with thoughts of impossible, and it's impossible. If the original ancestors of the giants were humans, then what about the sanguine? Could it be that they were just monsters that were mutated because of bionic characteristics? Impossible. We were clearly created by the ancestor. She has the authority of life and creation. It's completely different from the barbaric deities like the Giant King and the Elf King, who only know how to fight. As Emlyn's thoughts churned, he felt a baffling feeling of his pride was being cracked apart. His intuition, his rationality, his brain told him that the son, Derrick, didn't have any reason to lie about this matter. The possibility of other existences fabricating the scene was also very low, hence he subconsciously expelled the giant and the elves from the ranks of humanoid creatures, and he viewed them as branch of humanity. Leonard, Forrest, and Shio quickly accepted the possibility that the sun revealed to them, regardless of whether the giant ancestor was giant or human or even a curly-haired baboon. It was no big deal. At most, it just meant that many supernatural creatures were the result of bionic characteristics in the bodies of ordinary creatures, but this didn't cause any meaningful change to their concept of reality. The son Derrick calmed himself down and continued in a strange silence. After leaving the waning forest, we entered the Giant King's court through the barren tunnel. On the way, there were remnant powers of corruption and concealment. We had to make the correct response in order to pass the place. The palace contained a mirror processes powers related to the cycle of fate. As such, we were affected by the transformed into people who would participate in the gathering. We repeated the very short process, and the process was established the Rose Redemption. At this point, Derrick looked around and saw that the members were temporarily jolted out of their previous states. They were extremely interested in the organization called the Rose Redemption. They all knew that this was an extremely secretive and ancient organization that followed the beliefs of the true creator. It was the origins of the Roar Order, and its members were the kings of angels like Aurora, Boris, Medici, and Sasri. Derrick retracted his gaze and exhaled slightly. The two people who convened the Rose Redemption are Dark Angel Sasri and Evernight Goddess Amnesis. Huh? Audrey, Leonard, and Shio began to doubt their ears. They were all believers of the Evernight. They never expected that the goddess would be a member of the Rose Redemption. They'd even be one of its conveners. This was akin to saying that the Evernight Goddess was a member of the Tarot Club. If not for the fact that they knew what kind of person little son was, knowing that he wouldn't lie, they definitely would have suspected the truth of this matter. But now they were left temporarily. Uh, definitely would suspect the truth matter, but now they were left temporarily speechless. They didn't even dare to think too deeply about it. Alger subconsciously turned his body and looked at the little son, listening in slow and heaved tone. The participants included White Angel Acusis, Wind Angel Liderio. Alger's eyelids twitched and he didn't dare to think. God of Combat Bad Hill, Earth Mother Amabella. Emlyn, who was leaning against the back of his chair, unknowingly sat up straight. There was only one message echoing in the mind: the goddess of harvest, giant queen Amabella, god of dead Salinger, god of spiritual creatures Talsna. The son Derrick's voice echoed in the ancient and magnificent palace. It made Catlia Fours and the other members exchange looks. No one dared to say a word. It was as though they would suffer from a divine punishment if they leaned any deeper. After Derrick finished speaking, they remained silent. The scene was strangely quiet. Finally, Catlia sighed and said, "Rose redemption truly is powerful and terrifying. Before this, I couldn't even imagine that those existents were members," just as she said that the world Cameron Sparrow said with a deep, hoarse voice. That was an organization formed to resist the ancient sun god. Later on, only a few kings of angels remained. Upon hearing their conversations, it was as if Audrey and the other members had just snapped out of their dreams. All of them subconsciously cast their gaze to the end of the long molten table at the figure shrouded in grey fog. It was as though they were waiting for the ruling of the entity of authority there. The fool Klein, who had long expected such a scene, didn't respond directly. He nodded and slightly sighed. The fallen creator was born because of this. It's real. It's real. The Rose Redemption, which Mr. Fool hinted back then, actually has a deeper meaning. What is his identity in ancient times? And what position does he take in the matter? All these thoughts instantly formed and swept through the minds of the Tarot Club members. Derrick looked at everyone, and seeing that no one was speaking, he could only talk about the subsequent explorations. We met the leader of the King's Court chasers outside the palace, Light Curler Merskogame. He said that Dark Angel Sassery was in a state of slumber in the palace. Compared to the matter regarding Rose Redemption, news of the mysterious Dark Angel currently in slumber inside the Giant King's palace didn't stir up the emotions of Leonard, Emlyn, and the other members of the Tarot Club much. Only some of their curiosities had been satisfied. Of course, as a mysticologist, Catlia only hoped that the sun could speak a little more. After that, she returned to the Fool and bestowed us with the formula of the Seven King Potion. Towards the end of his explanation, Derrick concluded honestly. Audrey and the others were still in deep thought through what they had just happened. There was still a fear of being blasphemous, and no one responded. Only Alger thought for a moment and said, "Since the birth of the true creator originated from Rose Redemption, and he is unfamiliar with what happened at the Giant King's court, why is it that Shepherd Elder Lovia was completely unprepared for this?" Oh! I wonder why. Are we gonna get some answers on that one? Because I also would like to know. Would also love to know, you know? Super curious. This is also a question I wanted to ask. The Fool Klein, who was seated at the long table, molted table, echoed Mr. Hangman in his heart. Leonard thought for a moment and tried to find a possible reason. Although the birth of the true creator originates from the Rose Redemption, doesn't mean that he knows everything about the Rose Redemption. Perhaps figuring out the truth back then is one of his motives. Just as he said that, Justice Audrey objected. The fate of Aurora Boris, who was drawing the mural, is still in Rose Redemption and follows the true creator. If he had any questions, he could have just asked him directly. Perhaps the true creator's goal is to confirm Dark Angel Sassery's condition. From Shepherd Lovia's strong desire to enter the palace to the Giant King, we must preliminarily determine that Catlia gave her own option. I share similar thoughts. Alger glanced at the sun and said, "Of course, if we can't eliminate the possibility that the star suggested, perhaps Angel Fate Aurora Boris' condition isn't right, and he has lost most of his memories. He can only rely on the murals he left behind in the past to find his lost past. The odds are very low, but it doesn't mean that it's impossible. We aren't aware of what's special or problematic with the King of Angels." As he spoke, Alger glanced at Mr. Fool, who was hoping to get some hints on the existence. Unfortunately, he failed to get any feedback. It wasn't that the Fool Klein didn't have any ideas, but that he had too many ideas and was unable to list them out. Tail Devour Aurora Boris grows up by the true creator's side every time he reboots. No one knows what his current state is. After muttering in his heart, he's seeing that no one had seen more ideas. Klein controlled the world to look at the sun. I recently obtained a batch of mushrooms that can be grown in darkness when feeding them to the flesh of monsters. I wonder if your city is interested. Mushrooms that can devour the flesh and blood of monsters. Shio's company was surprised and curious. They didn't know how such a creature could exist. Indeed, there are many things in this world that they have yet to understand. This was the scribe should record down. Forrest sighed and came to the realization. Catlia's eyes suddenly darkened. She sat there without saying a word or moving like a statue. Upon hearing this, Derrick was delighted. His thoughts raced as he blurted out, "Can those mushrooms automatically attack monsters? If that was possible, then they could be used for food and also be used to permit a defense system for the ancient city, for the city of Silver, as though little son would be afraid of the mushrooms." In that end, his request was even more excessive. The world's mouth twitched slightly. "No, if the mushrooms can automatically attack monsters, it will be no exception for any of you." Derrick immediately felt a little ashamed as he hurriedly nodded. "I understand, Mr. World." Following that, he let the world make a further description. "Some of those mushrooms can grow on to flowers, others can produce milk or are rich in oil. They're equivalent to beef. Some have flavor that's close to fish, but there are no bones. Other than milk, which can be drunk directly, the rest must be cooked through steamed, boiling, frying, and roasting. Otherwise, the mushrooms you will absorb your flesh and body will be inside the body, regaining their vanity, turning the person into countless mushrooms." Audrey and Alger and the other members of the Terror Club originally listened on their interests as though they were existing story, but as they listened in, the subconsciously shrank back, becoming unusually silent. Only the hermit Catlia's eyelids twitched. She decided to have a good talk with Frank when she returned to the real world. When she was very worried that one day, when the Star Pirates were to hold a vote, a large number of mushrooms would be amongst those casting the sacred vote. At this moment, after listening attentively, Derrick couldn't hide his anticipation and curiosity. "Mr. World, what is flour? Is it like black place grass powder? Also, what is milk? What is beef and what is fish?" In fact, he had seen fish before, but he didn't think that they were fish. In a swamp in the south Derrick! Region of the city of Silver, there were quite a number of strange fish-shaped monsters that contained venom. They had boils all over their bodies, while others had teeth growing out of spots where their eyes were. Some had heads split open, revealing white membrane layer that could be used to hunt other creatures. No matter how strange those mushrooms are, to the city of Silver, they're just good things that are worth looking forward to. The first thing they need to solve is the possession of something, rather than whether it's good or not. When the fool Klein heard that, he cast the world's gaze to Justice Audrey. Giving detailed description of flour, milk, beef, and fish didn't match the world Garamond Sparrow's persona. As a senior spectator and Garamond Sparrow's physician, Justice instantly understood what he meant. He deliberated for a moment before saying, "The milk is liquid that cows use to rear its young." She believed that little son could understand this easily. After all, the city of Silver had pregnant women and babies. Seeing the son nod in acknowledgement, she continued, "Milk can provide you with lots of nutrients and help you grow taller and stronger." Audrey didn't finish her sentence because little son, who was sitting at the seat, was very muscular. After Miss Justice finished explaining the concepts, the son, Derrick, looked eagerly at the world Garamond Sparrow. "Thank you, Mr. World. This is exactly what our city needs. When I return, I'll immediately inform the chief. He'll definitely be happy. What would you like in exchange?" The fool Klein hesitated for a moment before controlling the world Garamond Sparrow. "The formula for classical metallurgist." No, Catlia subconsciously tried to stop him, but she ultimately held her back. She secretly looked at Mr. Fool, seeing that the great existence was silent. She immediately felt a lot more at ease. "All right," Derrick replied, happy. After the exchange, Leonard replied to have a private conversation with Emlyn. That moment, the members of the Terror Club screamed from them. Emlyn asked, "When are you letting me out?" Leonard maintained his posture and said, "This isn't something I can decide on. My suggestion is to get someone to contact the upper echelons of the Sanguine. As soon as possible and get them to think of a way to get you out. These two fellows created such an accident with a simple term, protective custody." The fool Klein, who was listening by the side, felt an urge to laugh, but he held back. Emlyn's expression darkened. After a few seconds, he said, "Will it be useful finding the upper echelons of the Sanguine? The goddess is the Lady of Crimson. She still cares a lot about you. Guys from the Moon Domain. Although you don't believe in her," Leonard said perfunctorily. The real explanation in his heart was that the ancient race, like the Sanguine, who had lived for several years, definitely had some connections with various churches, especially when the Sanguine Queen was still the Night Emperor's queen. At the time, the Church of Evernight had supported the Night Emperor. Emlyn also thought of this and nodded slightly. "I'll try to entrust this to Mr. World." This was the most reliable person he could think of. Just as he said that, Emlyn and Leonard suddenly spoke at the same time. "That won't work." "You also realize it?" The moon Emlyn immediately glanced at the star beside him. Leonard scoffed. "It's such a simple problem." Emlyn returned with a scoff. But you just suggested that I contact the upper echelons of the Sanguine. I've been locked up in the Church of Evernight for days. They must have known about it for long ago. They probably didn't attempt to rescue me because they're observing, wanting to know who would rescue me, thus finding my partners. Leonard looked elsewhere. It's probably the case, so you can only continue staying behind Channis Gate perhaps a few more days. They'll lose their patience and get you out. Emlyn didn't know what expression to show. After a private exchange between the human and the sanguine, the world Garen Sparrow looked at Forrest and said, "Give me the venue, the time for the meeting. After gathering, I'll look for you and bring you a new place." "All right." Forrest hurriedly applied to Mr. Fool and conjured a parchment. While handling it over, she hesitated for a moment before asking, "Mr. World, what needs to be taken note of this time?" "Keep warm." The world Garen Sparrow replied. "Keep warm." Forrest was momentarily stunned, unsure of what she was trying to get at. After looking at the parchment, the world Garen Sparrow surveyed the area and said, "Everyone in Backlund, please stay close attention to your surroundings for anything abnormal. Firstly, it was very likely that Zeratil would fish out Amon. Secondly, Demoness Trissy might be able to help Mr. Dork prepare for the ritual. Thirdly, George III might take a final step, becoming a Black Emperor, and get some point in time." "All right." Audrey and the other members of the Tarot Club who were in Backlund nodded one after another. They recalled the recent situation and didn't find anything out of the ordinary. No, literally. After another exchange, the other members of the request, Miss Audrey used hypnosis to help her forget the potion, the memories after the gathering ended. One figure after another vanished above the great fog, leaving only the Fool climb. After sitting in silence for more than 10 minutes, he thought of another question before returning to the real world. He teleported to the agreed-upon location, waited for Miss Magician to meet him. It was almost winter, and the sky had turned dark at 4 in the afternoon. Under the heavy black clouds, the street lamps hadn't been lit, and the coal gas resources were controlled due to the war. In the alley where few people visited, the environment grew darker as a cold wind wafted through. Although it wasn't like a blade that could slice through a person's face with coldness, it seemed to possess magic as it slowly but firmly seeped into the cloth of the people. As Garen Sparrow, Klein raised his hand and pressed down on his top hat, he saw Miss Magician wearing a dark-colored scarf and thick coat. She carried a rather heavy suitcase and walked into the alley looking extremely wary. In the Lowen Kingdom, due to the Church of Evernight influence, many of the clothes that were deemed only male also had lady versions of them. Just like in Intis, the ladies of high society often sat sideways while on horseback, thanks to the special saddle. However, Lowen didn't do the same. The ladies had their own horseback attire. Klein pulled out his left hand that was wearing creeping hunger from his pocket and spread open his fingers. "Do you have a stockpile prepared?" Forrest suddenly felt a cold wind blow down her neck as they subconsciously shrank back. "Enough for at least 2 weeks of being serialized. I've already handed it over to the editor of the newspaper." Without waiting for Garen Sparrow to ask further, she hurriedly added, "I brought a fountain pen, ink, and paper." Forrest nodded significantly, took 2 steps forward, and reached out to grab Miss Messenger's shoulder. Klein nodded slightly, took 2 steps forward, and reached out to grab Miss Messenger's shoulder. Forrest immediately focused on as an illusory book appeared in her eyes. As it slowly flipped through, her surroundings immediately became dark and colorful. The reds were redder, the blacks were blacker, and the browns were browner, as they overlapped each other, making her feel like she was in a trance. Forrest was already used to this state of had successfully recorded during this traveling process. She also carefully observed the scenery of her trip, as well as the strange and irreducible spirit world creatures that branded themselves in her mind. After a few breaths, her vision went back, and she felt a cold she had never experienced before. Her body couldn't help but tremble. Forrest instinctively used her magic trick to illuminate her surroundings. Looking around, she realized that she was in a wooden hut. The world Garen Sparrow had already vanished. Good. Get out of there. Where am I? Also, kind of diabolical to just drop her off in a hut in like the middle of nowhere, probably in the freezing cold, and he's just like, "See ya." Forrest looked at the window and saw that there was a thick layer covering it, preventing any light from shining in. This made her even more puzzled. She came to the door. I know I keep saying Miss Messenger, Miss Magician. I just can't read. This made her even more puzzled. She came to the door, stretched out her right hand, and pulled the door behind her. With a creaking sound, she saw the snow blocking out the exit. Forrest was stunned as Garen Sparrow warning echoed in her mind. Keep warm. In just 1 to 2 minutes, Klein had already circled the sea once. He used the prey that had Long selected to placate creeping hunger, and he returned to the rental apartment in Backland, awaiting Queen Mystic and Miss Sharon to gather information about abnormalities. In fact, with Klein's style, he would personally take action in this area and conclude an additional investigation at the same time. He wanted to ensure Demoness Trissy had no plans to help Mr. Door escape, but considering that Zuratil was already in Backland, he decided to be cautious and give up on the idea of loitering around. Under the influence of the law of convergence and bionic characteristics, he felt that if he were to wander around Backland, it would only matter of time before he ran into Zuratil or even Amon. I had already thought of how to disguise myself, buying a bicycle, getting a uniform, and riding it across different streets as a postman. This is the easiest way to avoid suspicion. After taking a sip of gurney sap he brought back from the sea, he leaned back into his chair and allowed his marionette and Ewan Conus to individually massage his shoulders and legs. The Forsaken Land of the God in Afternoon Town Camp. After Derrick Burke opened his eyes, he immediately stood up, opened his door, and walked around the bonfire of the chiefs room. Expressing an excitement, he took a deep breath and raised his hand to slightly knock on the thick wooden door. "Please come in." Amidst the sound of knocking, Colin Iliad's deep voice sounded. Derrick turned the doorknob and pushed open the door as he looked at Demon Hunter Collard, whose hair was white and had old scars on his face. He blurted out, "Your Excellency, I found some strange mushrooms that can be eaten." Colin Iliad fell silent for a moment before slowly asking, "Mushrooms?" After hearing the puzzlement in the chief's word, Derrick instantly recalled the mushrooms he had seen before. It came from the abandoned temple of the fallen creator. It looked especially bright and appetizing, but it was essentially extremely dangerous. His mood instantly calmed down. He nodded and said, "Yes, mushrooms, different breeds of mushrooms. They can devour the flesh and blood of monsters to grow." Derrick described the unique traits of the mushrooms in details, and he explained what milk, beef, fish, and flour were. In the end, he emphasized that the mushrooms had to be fully cooked before they were eaten. He also had to take note of the species, which were rich in poison. Colin Iliad listened quietly without showing any change in emotion. After some thought, he said, "What other dangers do they have, or should I say, points that require taking note of?" Derrick's face suddenly flushed red. "I'll study it again." Without waiting for the chief to speak, he turned around, opened the door, and ran out. Before returning to his room, he took a deep breath and sat down. He began to pray to Mr. Fool, asking him to forward the question to Mr. World. Above the great fog, Klein sat on the high-backed chair belonging to the Fool. He tapped the armrest and the index finger silently, muttering, "What the other dangers there are." Although Frank's imagination, action, and creativity make me a little fearful, he's still a Sequence 5 druid after all. No matter how dangerous the mushrooms are, how dangerous can they be? With the years of experience in the City of Silver, his experience in the dark environments, it's easy to deal with those mushrooms. In the ruins of the Battle of the Gods, the futures producing of milk, the pirate head growing a watermelon, and other shocking phenomena were due to the remnant aura and divine power of Earth Mother in that area. The real murderer was a deity rather than Frank. Man, if the formation of the Forsaken Land of Gods happens due to the betrayal of the ancient sun god, the things left behind in intense battle are definitely not limited to the powers of Evernight, concealment, degradation, degeneration, and storm. Perhaps there are some areas that have influenced the sun and earth. This, after some thought, he conjured the world Gammon Sparrow and made him tell the truth. If they encounter divine powers of the Earth domain, those mushrooms might experience an unknown mutation. After receiving response, Derrick rushed out of his room and ran to the chief's door. This time, the door opened without him knocking. Derrick turned his back to his teammate by the bonfire. He entered the room and casually closed the heavy wooden door. The divine power of the Earth domain might cause the mushrooms to undergo an unknown mutation, he said frankly, without explaining how he had figured that out. Demon Hunter Colin's expression remained unchanged as he repeated the key phrase softly, "The divine power of the Earth domain." He lowered his voice and finally fell silent. 10 seconds later, he said, "After we return, we can set up a region to plant them to see the effects." "Then what's the price?" Derrick immediately replied, "The formula for classical metallurgist." Colin Iliad nodded slowly. "This has to be decided by the 6-member council when we return to the city. I will push for the matter as soon as possible." Their expedition team would be returning to the City of Silver in the next 2 days. Firstly, after the exploration, the few who survived, as well as those who lost their loved one, needed time to adjust their mental states. Secondly, there was a limited amount of food left at the camp, so there was no way to plant the black-faced grass around Afternoon Town. They could only rely on hunting monsters to replenish themselves. Therefore, one of the responsibilities of the expedition team was to deliver safe food, switching out items that would happen to fixed intervals. "Yes, Sir Excellency." Derrick didn't rush him. He had long gotten used to the process. After he left the room, Colin Iliad came to the window and looked at the bonfire in the middle of the camp. The flame burned quickly in the deep darkness, and the faint yellow light scattered across the entire camp. Roasting over the fire was a disgusting vampire covered in pus. A few days later, Klein separately received the corresponding feedback from Queen Mystic Bernadette and Numinous Sex Patrick Bryan. and Miss Sharon. He confirmed that there were no anomalies regarding material or personal flow in Backland recently. From the looks of it, Demoness Trissy only wished to speak to Mr. Dorr for the time being. No, literally. Furthermore, this seems to be the first time they will establish connection. Regardless, I still need to give a warning beforehand. This requires finesse. The more I say, the more likely a mistake will be made. Furthermore, I cannot reveal my trump card. After some thought, he found the hair in the deceased that Miss Magician had provided. He unfolded the piece of paper and wrote, "This is what you need. It's a lock of hair from a descendant from the Abraham family. The person who provided it has a request. That is to help the existence one question. The problem regarding how to get rid of the curse. Finally, let me remind you, be careful of Mr. Dorr." Klein folded the letter and tucked the lock of hair into it. He took out the adventurer harmonica and blew into it. After a brief silence, Renette Tinker walked out of the void with her 4 beautiful heads in hand. "Give this letter to this deduced idiot." He instructed the head did over the letter. Just as he said that, his heart skipped a beat and he hurriedly added another question. "Can you locate him?" "Yes." Once the heads of Renette Tinker answered questions before bidding the letter. Klein narrowed his eyes. In the Backland Bridge area, according to the information provided by Miss Messenger, he found the man who had been seduced by Trissy and ended up helping her send the letters. However, Klein didn't enter the apartment, nor did he disturb his target. He stuck both hands into his black trench coat pocket and continued walking forward. Under the illumination of the street lamps, he walked all the way to the crossroads and turned to another street. During this process, a rat was stealing food in a particular building suddenly shivered. It then gave up on a piece of cheese and followed the usual tunnel. Then it used the past tunnel and moved towards the targeted area. Then the rat opened its mouth and let out a human voice. "Blessed of the sea and spirit world, guardian of the Roast Archipelago, ruler of the undersea creature, master of tsunamis and storms, the great Calvatua." The moment the rat finished the sentence, Klein, who had already turned into another street, vanished. There was only sparks left on the spot that quickly dissipated. He used Flaming Jump, but he wasn't using it to travel. Instead, he had entered the hotel room that he had booked to rendezvous with one of his marionettes. So he didn't need to worry too much about being sensed by Zeratil and meeting the accident. After all, the destination was clear and the journey was short, and there was protection. In the room, with Enya watching, he took 4 steps counterclockwise and arrived above the grey fog. At the seat at the end of the long bronze table, he held the sea god scepter with his help of his prayer light and observed the target through the true vision. The man who helped Demoness Trissy relayed the news. A few minutes later, Renette Tinker appeared in the apartment as promised. She took the gold coin and left the envelope in the table. The man trembled in fear again, but at the end he overcame his own fear. He picked up the letter and weighed it. 50 minutes later, he carefully took out the black sticky paste, separated the small blob, and applied it to the surface of the mirror. Soon he saw the young girl who had occupied all the dreams in the dark mirror and hurriedly said, "That crazy adventurer just sent a letter. It seems to contain something else. I didn't open it. Superior instructions." At that moment, above the grey fog, the scene Klein saw began to show a strange phenomenon. In his vision, the mirror's condition had already turned blurry. It was closer to being dark and illusory passageway and didn't look realistic enough. It was connected to something similar in the surrounding areas, forming a complicated and abstract spiderweb. It was interwoven into a profound and strange world. Through the grey fog's true vision, he could barely make out the general situation, but he was unable to make out the details. He didn't know what the strange and terrifying creature hid within the world. In mysticism, mirrors are often given a symbolic meaning of leadership in other kingdoms, and are mostly related to terrifying horrors. Is this the mirror world? The beyonder powers are completely unrelated to this domain. That's not true. If someone prays to me and attempts magic mirror divination, then they will naturally be illusory passageways. Okay. That points towards the grey fog. Strictly speaking, the mirror world isn't a real world. It's closer to the collective manifestation of doors. By connecting the different mirrors in different mysterious kingdoms, if one becomes lost in there, they might directly appear in the abyss or even the cosmos. Of course, demigods with the ability should be able to create a reflection world and hide inside. The collective manifestation of doors, high sequence beyonders of the demoness wraith and apprentice pathways also have similar powers. Does the secret in the secret sorcerer represent the mirror world to some extent? This is sufficient mysterious and secretive. Under normal circumstances, even though true visions there no way directly see the mirror world unless someone triggers it. Klein nodded and thought as he heard demoness Trissy voice reply, threw the letter into the mirror. Can it be thrown in? As a low sequence beyonder, the man had never seen such a miraculous thing before. After some hesitation, he held the letter and pressed it against the mirror. On the surface of the mirror, the darkness suddenly spread out like ripples of aqueous light. The man felt the firm touch lighten as he saw the letter magically pass through the glass surface and enter the illusory swirling interior. Right on the heels of that, the letter seemed to attract by the huge whirlpool as it continued to sink deeper into the room where Trissy was. Above the grey fog, Klein raised his sea-god scepter and focused on tracking the letter, attempting to lock onto the location of the demoness. At that moment, in his true vision, the dark and deep mirror world began to quickly, violently turning everything into a blur. By the time the quaking calmed down, Klein had already lost traces of the letter and demoness Trissy. The aura of the primordial demoness girl can even interfere with observations like this. After a moment of silence, Klein let out a sigh. It was precisely because of the various peculiarities related to Trissy that he didn't take the risk to mix with the hair into the myriad materials to locate her. It was easy for him to suffer in terrible hex. He might even die on the spot. To Klein, death didn't really matter. After all, as long as his corpse didn't pulverize, it was likely the case that he could be revived, but that wouldn't mean that he could seize the opportunity to lock onto Trissy. She would definitely change the location quickly. Wouldn't that be equivalent to wasting a precious chance to revive? Do we know why Klein doesn't... Did I read it and forget or miss it? Do we know why Klein can come back to life? Is it because he's a transmigrator? Or do we not know this yet? After suffering the setback, Klein quickly returned to the real world and left the Backland Bridge area. The next morning, an ordinary... Okay. No, I didn't know. Okay, I didn't think I did. Be happy that I'm asking and I'm not looking it up out of shame. Okay. Because, like, yeah. Fair. Klein rode the carriage to St. Samuel Cathedral. He planned on chanting the honorific name of the Evernight goddess to inform her of demoness Trissy when the time came. If the accidents were to happen on the night of the full moon, there was at least a deity watching over Backland and would also be prepared ahead of time. Back then, the Evernight goddess was one of those who had exhaled and sealed Mr. Door. She definitely knew the other party's tricks very well. In such aspects, Klein had never put on such a strong front. He had a very clear understanding of himself. Since he could solve the problem himself, he would find someone who could solve the problem and help out. As for why he wasn't doing this at home, he had to go to St. Samuel Cathedral. It was because he wanted to observe the situation in the area around Boakland Street and search for any tiny traces of that spelled Amon's arrival. Wonder where we might find that. Hazel and her family had once been involved in Amon, and she herself belonged to Marauder Pathway, but it be her fate or the convergence characteristics, she was among the high-risk group of people who could meet Amon by chance. With regards to this, Klein didn't dare be too careless or negligent. He reminded himself that he made arrangements to do self-examinations every once in a while. Similarly, due to Miss Justice's follow-up treatment of Hazel's psychological trauma, anything that happened to Hazel could easily lead to her. Therefore, Klein was also very worried about the safety of the noble lady. He believed that it was necessary to check on her condition throughout the Crimson Star from time to time. Of course, he would avoid relatively awkward periods of time. As his thoughts raced, Klein, who was already close to Phelps Street, got off the carriage in advance. He allowed his marionette NU to secretly recite the honorific name of the sea god. He and his marionette Kona switched positions in a sealed space that was distorted. He took 4 steps counterclockwise and went above the grey fog. Then, with the help of the sea god scepter wide in his true vision, he carefully observed the situation in Boakland Street and the Low and Charity Bursary Foundation. Hazel isn't parasitized. Neither is Miss Justice. Same for their maidservants, pets, and bodyguards. The residents and staff of the Charity Bursary Foundation don't show signs either. There are no traces of Amon-related activity in the various streets of the area. Klein heaved a sigh of relief and returned to the real world. Following that, he approached St. Sammy Cathedral and passed through the doors, finding a seat in the dark and quiet prayer hall. After chanting the honorific name of the Evernight goddess in a low voice, Klein described simply, Demoness Trissy has obtained the hair of the Abraham family descent. She plans to contact a hidden existence on the night of the full moon. I cannot be sure of her exact purpose. After sitting quietly for a while and seeing that the goddess didn't respond, nor did the archbishop appear, Klein wore a silk top hat and slowly walked out of the cathedral. At night, he switched position and controlled the rat marionette as recited another honorific name. The great god of war, the symbol of iron blood, the ruler of chaos and strife, I wish to meet you. Just like before, the rat lost its life moments after finishing the prayer. Following that, Klein pulled away from the area. He wanted to meet Red Angel and talk about Mr. Door and Dark Angel Sastry. After waiting a few minutes, with the help of another rat marionette, he saw that the other rat burst into flames, emitting a burning white flame. The flame quickly formed a short line on the ground. I don't want to see you. The muscles on Klein's face twitched indiscernibly. After some thought, he gave up and left the area. After some seconds, the remaining burning white flames formed. A new sentence. Fucking... This guy. A new sentence. Come on, beg me. By then, Klein had already left. On the house, somewhere in Backlund, the pale-faced Sauron Enhorn Medici stood up from the sofa in a black, red-lined robe. Because of course he's in a black, red-lined robe. He frowned and muttered to himself, who's disturbing me? I fucking love him. I love him so much. No. I'm not gonna say he's like my favorite character, but he's definitely up there. He's so entertaining to read. Always. Who's disturbing me? In the blink of an eye, full moon had dawned and the light on his Backlund, and its light on Backlund. In the room illuminated by the crimson light, Demoness Trissy stood at the altar. Around her were ritual materials, rubies, sapphires, emeralds, diamonds, pearls, and lazurites. After some complicated preparations, she lit her hair in her hand and placed it into the cauldron. When the fire was tainted with the light of darkness, Trissy took 2 steps back and solemnly chanted in Yon, Great door of all doors, guide of the endless cosmos, key to all mysterious worlds. So, fun fact, I actually have to stop now. Wait, give me 1 second. Let me see if I can... I might be able to do one more chapter. But most likely we'll have to stop now. Which is fine, because that means I just, like, finish on this. And then I do chapter 1134 to the ending. Yes, I do have to end now. Okay, is it better? Okay. Give me 1 second. Okay, fuck it. I'm just gonna be late. As Trissy recited the words, and I'll change it really quick. This will have to be the last chapter I do, though. Okay. As Trissy recited the words, and gems around her emanated cracking sounds as they shattered into powder and floated up. They shimmered with red, blue, green, and resplendent light before rapidly gathering in a torrent that surged towards the candle light on the altar. At the same time, strands of hair that had been burnt inside the cauldron joined the process. The fire began to expand and interweave with each other, turning increasingly dark as the illusory door that led to other worlds. Trissy immediately felt the surrounding temperatures drop rapidly, as though countless dangers were seeping out of the fire. A sentence flashed around her mind as it reminder from Gammon Sparrow, be careful of Mr. Door. As expected of someone with a messenger of that level, his understanding of Mr. Door and his confidence and knowledge about my plans might be deeper and more precise than I imagined. Trissy slowly took a deep breath and patiently waited for the subsequent changes. In just the blink of an eye, she felt that the void in the room thinned significantly. Many of the places were covered with shadows, as though they were large amounts of indiscernible creatures hiding behind them. The dim, expanding flames turned to a gigantic, deep crimson vortex. As the vortex spun, the ethereal voice that could pierce through one's spirit body finally sounded from the bottom cheek. Upon hearing this voice, the blood vessel in Trissy's forehead throbbed as if her head had been pierced by countless steel needles in a crazy stabbed and twisted. Her black hair flamed up, and despite the lack of wind, every strand grew thicker and the skin on her face became transparent. Her blood vessels protruded one after another, densely packed with spiders' webs. After spending a great deal of effort, Trissy finally managed to control herself. She then heard the voice that could make most Beyonders lose control, chuckling and saying, "It looks like its cheeks blessed." Back then, we had seen the second blasphemy slate together, and we were able to surpass Sequence 1 and live to this day. Now, the only ones left are the artisan, Cheek, and me. Trissy ignored Mr. Dora's poignant sigh and said with a twisted expression, "Honorable Mr. Dora, I have something to ask you." "Speak. The time spent being lost and trapped in the darkness and the storm is just too boring. It's rare for someone to have a chat with me." The terrifying voice replied without much change from the slow, rotating dark vortex. Trissy's facial muscles twitched involuntarily, still unable to get used to the ravings of this evil god's equal. She paused for a few seconds before asking, I want to know if there are any unorthodox ways to enter the 9 secret mausoleums built by Blood Emperor Tudor for becoming Black Emperor." It was unknown where he was. Mr. Dora's ethereal laughter sounded through the endless void. "So it's because of this. This isn't difficult. I'll give you a symbol. You can gather the blood of Beyonders from different pathways and mix them together. Mixing it with your spirituality, draw the symbol in front of the mausoleum. Then you can open the secret passage that leads into it." As the existence spoke, sparks separated from the dark vortex, forming a rather complicated symbol in midair. It was like doors that were stacked with decreasing sizes and randomly entered without end. Trissy held back in excruciating pain, her spirit body tearing apart. She memorized the symbol and sought confirmation. There must be blood from all 22 Beyonder pathways. Each pathway only requires the blood of a Beyonder, regardless of his sequence. How much blood of each pathway is required? Mr. Dora replied in the same way that he had been raving earlier. Right. There's no need for too much. Just a small tube will do. Just guarantee that the symbol drawing can be finished. Although Trissy wore a painful grimace, she couldn't help but smile when she received the critical information. This, combined with her overall expression, made her appear odd, as though she was a lunatic. After completing the main goal, Trissy asked again to ensure smooth cooperation with Gammon Sparrow in the future. The Abraham family wants to know how to get rid of the ancient curse. The dark vortex was silent for a few before sighing. Set up such a ritual, sacrifice one of the demigods of the seer, apprentice, or marauder pathway. Once I leave the storm and penetrate the darkness, the curse will no longer exist. Trissy wasn't interested in how the Abraham family could escape the ancient curse. After receiving the answer, she could take any longer. As she thanked Mr. Dora, she began to stop the ritual. As for Mr. Dora, he didn't attempt to bewitch, threaten, or corrupt her. No, do not let this man out. Do not let this man out. After the dark fire vortex disintegrated into the ritual ended, Trissy began to cogitate, spending nearly an hour to calm the effects of the door's ravings. After doing all of this, Trissy took out a pen and paper and copied the symbol provided by Mr. Dora and described 2 answers in details. She knew that she was being pursued by Saintess of White Katarina, and that seemed to be even more terrifying hunters that would follow her awake. It was very difficult for her to find the blood of Beyonders in different pathways that quickly, so she planned on leaving this manor to Gammon Sparrow. In addition, she believed that even if George III and the others believed that there was no problem with the secret mausoleum and that it was safe enough, thus not leaving too many guards, there were still precautions inside. It was something that a Sequence 4 could quickly force their way through and cause damage. That way, they would be stopped by reinforcements and lose their best chance. As for Gammon Sparrow, even his messenger was at the level of an angel. The strength of the organization behind him was obvious, so the ability to destroy the mausoleum in a critical moment, causing the Black Emperor ritual to fail. She couldn't complete it herself, so of course she had to find assistance from someone with the accomplish it. After throwing the letter into the mailbox nearby, the black-coated Trissy slowly walked down the cold and lonely road. On the dim road, she looked at the light from the gas lamps and laughed self-deprecatingly. For the sake of a little indignation, I actually gone this far. You're lucky, at least I'll avenge you. If I die apart from those who hate me, no one will remember me. After receiving the letter from his messenger, Klein sat on the chair and read it several times. Before he went above the great fog to define the authenticity of Dora's methods, he subconsciously thought about how quickly he could gather the blood from 22 Beyonder pathways. The symbol is very similar to the symbol behind Miss Messenger's chair. I can use my own seer. For apprentice, I can find Miss Magician. I can find Miss Magician and also give her some pressure to write. There are 3 choices for the Marauder pathway. Transform a marionette into Mosquito and send a mosquito to bite Hazel, obtained from Vice Admiral Iceberg, third mate named Flowery Bowtie, and lastly get it from Leonard's grandpa. The Spectator pathway, Miss Justice. Bard pathway, Little Sun. Storm, Mr. Hangman. Reader, Vice Admiral Iceberg, or the demigod named Luca. Secret Supplicant, get the second mate of Ma'am Hermit, Bloodless Heath Doyle. The Corpse Collector pathway, Numinous Sophisticates Patrick Bryan. The Sleepless, My Dear Poet. He said it! Oh my god, I love it so much. The Warrior pathway, most of the citizens of the City of Silver, or Father Trotsky. Planter, Frank, Apothecary, Emlyn, Arbiter, Miss Shio, Lawyer, Marionette, Conus, Hunter, Donitz, or Anderson, Demoness, get Trissy to provide it herself, Prisoner, Miss Sharon, or Marie, Criminal, I typically have no targets, Mystery Prior, Ma'am Hermit, Savant, Frank, Experiments Assistant, Monster, Marionette, NEU. From the looks of it, most of them can be attained in a very short period of time. The corresponding channels have sufficient trust in me and believe that I would curse them with their blood. This demoness Trissy definitely has a way to eliminate the connection between the blood and actual blood. She won't object, only devil. Although I have encountered a few, I have either died or fled. Currently, I have no target in mind. Yes, I can ask Little Sun if the City of Silver has any devil flesh and blood left in its inventory. There will encounter some from time to time. If he hadn't thought of it, Klein would have realized that in less than 2 years of his transmigration, he had actually established a deeper connection with most of the Beyonder pathways. He immediately retracted the thoughts and seriously considered Mr. Door's escape ritual. Sacrifice one of each, Marauder, Apprentice, and Seer demigods. These are 3 pathways that can be interchangeable. Mr. Door wants to temporarily reconcile the 3 pathways and use an ingenious method to open the passage to return. The demigods of these 3 pathways aren't that easy to capture. It's possible for the Abraham family to do so at its peak after the death of the high sequence Beyonders of the War, the 4th Eve, Brurs, and corresponding setbacks. It's pretty much hopeless. If Mr. Door could be more patient and give the descendants more time to grow, it would be impossible. However, he still constantly cries for help, causing the death and promising descendants. Is he crazy? A lunatic who looks like a normal person? After some thought, he burned the letter and went above the gray fog to do 2 divination. The revelation he received was that of a method to either the secret mausoleum was real, the door returned ritual, or was also true. Looking at the spiritual pendulum in his hand, he sat silently in the high-back chair for a long time. After a few minutes, he clenched his hand and gripped the topaz pendant tightly. He muttered to himself, and there is left to the wait for the bizarre sorcerer potion to completely digest it and wait for George III to hold the ritual. Oh my god. Okay, so much just happened. We are now on chapter... I'm quickly looking at it. Where is it? So much just happened. He said, my dear poet! Oh my god, I'm so happy now. Damn. His dogs! The doggos! Oh my god, I love it so much. The doggos. Oh my god, no. Anyway, I love it so much. Okay. I will let you know if it's either on Monday or if it's on Tuesday. I will read the last 15 chapters of Volume 5 and we'll finish Volume 5. So, without further ado, thank you guys so much for joining. I hope you have, or 16 chapters. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your night or a wonderful rest of your day, whichever one you're at. And I will see you guys in a couple days to finish Volume 5. Okay, bye-bye.